And we're streaming. How wonderful. Alright, here we go. Today we're going to be looking at Tony Seba's work. Seba? Clean Disruption of Energy and Transportation. It's about an hour. Really, really beautiful video, though. I'm just saying this for the people who are who are looking at this in the future. I'm going to wait a little bit until we actually get some viewers. As you can see, stream. I got concurrent viewers and nobody because I just started the stream, right? And I started a few minutes early, no less. So while we're waiting for people to actually pop on in, let's Barnabas. How you doing, bud? You crossed the finish line first. Good to see you, bud. We're gonna be doing. We're gonna be looking at. You ever watch Knowing Better? Nope. I don't know what that is. Is that a YouTube channel? Knowing Better? Knowing Better. But I don't know what lies I do. Watching. Oh wow, quite a few. Redefining American segregation. Yeah, graduating. Okay, I'll take a look at this guy. For sure. Subscribe. Done. Easy. We're just going to wait a little while until we get a little bit higher of a viewer count. I suspect we'll get something else going on pretty shortly here. Of course, the residential schools. I think that's going to be tomorrow's video. I'll be talking about the news. 215, 215 kids, like a mass grave discovered. Absolutely brutal. And this picture is absolutely on point, right? Whoever is, this is coming out of the Halifax Herald, the adder. Nailed it. Just nailed it. This is the power of art right here, right? Like, just capturing so cleanly, like, what obviously had to have been the truth. Like, you like, how many schools do you know of where you find, like, a mass grave out back? Like, geez Louise. Like, and 215? 215? Like, I went to I lived in a small community in the first place, and then on top of that, I was in a small, like, private Christian school in that community, and when I graduated, there was only 200 kids at the school, and so that actually gives me, like, a pretty good picture. Like, how many is 215? My entire school when I graduated. Like, that's a travesty. Like, that's a disaster. And people, anybody who has at any point stood up and said that systemic racism doesn't exist in Canada should be ashamed of themselves, right? Like, just should be. I hope they feel shame and I hope they feel guilt for ever holding that position, right? And I'm talking about people like Aaron O'Toole, right? Who, like, when this news came out, he did, like, a whole press conference and, like, made a whole statement and all of this. And his statement was good, right? Because he's well coached and obviously he's being groomed to be the Prime Minister of Canada. But, like, as recently as a month ago, he was making statements, like, downplaying the residential schools and talking about how, like, oh, these were intended to be educational facilities first. And it's like, no, they weren't. Like, no, they weren't. They were completely designed to be a prison for these kids after they got kidnapped from their families. So, like, I'm happy that Aaron O'Toole has sort of turned the corner on it and that he has to actually speak honestly about it, or else, you know, he gets shit on. But the truth of the matter is that that's kind of just a facade, right? That what Aaron O'Toole brings to the table is just the first part, that it's this picture, right? He wants us to focus on the facade and to completely ignore what's going on behind the scenes. So, yeah, it does. In fact, it's the exact subject I was watching on Knowing Better, how ingrained it is from banks to schools. Yeah, like, it's completely within the fabric of our culture and our community. And it's also how I think about capitalism generally. It's why I keep talking about the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, that like capitalism has always been this idea of like outside of government, and like sure it tries to downplay government and it tries to say the problem is government and all this and it tries to play it down, but now we're seeing here in Canada a merger of capitalist forces with our government forces, right? That up until now, this idea that capitalism has, in Canada, that capitalism has, as a system, has been separate from the government has actually been true. That sure, you can like elect somebody who will like support business and put in like subsidies and things like this, like that has always existed in every system ever. But now we have like an institutional merging through the Canada Infrastructure Bank of capitalism and the governmental sector, which when capitalism and government merge, that's called fascism. And it's happened here in Canada, 2016, and nobody talks about it. Like I'm the only person I've ever heard talk about it. I'm going to do this residential school video, and then I've got to do another video on that, because literally nobody is talking about it. Like, nobody. I think I've read literally one article from the Jacobin about it, and just complete silence otherwise. And it is probably the most important issue in Canada today, in my view. And maybe one day I'll find somebody who talks about the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. But right now, total. And to me, it's a disaster. It's an institutional disaster. It's a structural disaster that guarantees that the wealth gap will continue. Income inequality will get worse. It guarantees these things. Like, we might build a couple of bridges and we might build some infrastructure that capitalists want to see built, but the transfer of wealth from 99% of the society into the hands of like 5 people is just going to get way worse. I'd like to hear your take on pensions, RRSPs, etc. I mean, we should take care of our elderly, like, and it should be built into the system. I mean, I support things like a basic income. I support things like a pension or RRSP. It's always been a concession to capital. Like, everything in our society has always been a concession to capital, and things like pensions and RRSPs are not really different. And also, yeah, they do so well because people don't live long enough to collect. Yeah, generally, there's truth to that. That, you know, the house always wins, right? Like, if you create a system to benefit the populace, the capitalist structure will, even while conceding that this thing is necessary, will organize it in such a way so that ultimately they win, right? Which, I mean, I don't know if I'm, like, that doesn't sound so terrible, because it means that it will always be around, right? As someone who had their life wasted due to boomers, I say they got theirs already. Use RSPs to house us minimum wage workers. Well, and I understand where you're coming from, Barnabas, with that idea, like, life wasted due to boomers, right? And, but, like, we, just think of it as training, right? Just think of it as, like, leveling up, right? Like, when you're playing a video game, you gotta kind of grind low-level trash before you can sort of get into the larger stuff. Which, that's somewhat a hopeful message, which I want to bring, because we are going to be watching Tony Seba, right? And he's going to be talking about the clean disruption of energy and transportation. I don't rightly remember who showed me this. It was somebody here, though, showed me this, and I watched it, and I really liked it. It does bring a hopeful message. It does bring forward the idea that maybe we can actually, and maybe there will be, in short order, major achievements and major victories for a clean transition away from fossil fuels. That is all very possible. I'm going to wait a couple more minutes, I think, see if we can get more than 4 people watching. Hi guys, how you doing? 4 of you. Thanks for being here. I'm so glad. Yeah, I'm so glad. This weekend was so weird for me. I had such a weird weekend. Like, had a bit of a tiff with one of the subreddits that I post on. I ended up getting banned. I won't out which one because I don't think it's helpful, but it definitely has happened. So I ended up getting banned for a week there. So I suspect my subscriber count will kind of plateau a little bit. Like, probably still go up a little bit, but probably plateau mainly. But at the same time, there's another subreddit that's just itself kind of emerging and growing that has said that I can post on their stuff, so hopefully we can grow together. That'll be nice. Yeah. Honestly, it kind of felt... No, our communism has explicit... And I'll say this without stirring any pots or anything. They do not want me to post because they view themselves... And I think this is right, and I think it's completely fine. They view themselves as mainly educational, mainly like, this is information, right? Hi, Elias. How you doing today, bud? Good to see you. Thanks for popping in. Our communism, I think, sees itself as mainly educational, and they mainly want to keep the conversation within the confines of education. And I think that they're really not interested in political commentary on the kind of modern day outside of major news sources, right? That if The Guardian or something does an article that involves communism or some kind of conversation with that, sure. But, you know, I don't think it's unreasonable. I think that they're more interested in the information and all of that, and they're less interested in figures popping up, right? Like and somebody like me, right? I think that might be completely reasonable, right? Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, and they're very tight, and they're very aware, Barnabas, of. And Elias, I am doing well. Thank you so much. I actually feel a lot better now that I'm doing the live stream. This weekend was very strange because I didn't do the live stream, and I felt somewhat listless. Honestly, I was a bit like, oh, I'm not doing a live stream this evening. I guess I'll play a video game or something. Okay. Well, and like. Our communism is very tight because they're very aware, I mean, given their history, right? Given the history of communism generally, they're very aware that people can come in and like brigade them and cause a lot of problems. And so my general advice, and I've been temporarily banned from our communism for very, very, very just like, yeah, like simple sort of stuff, right? The stuff that I would call center left kind of commentary, and I think they've got a really hard line that they focus on. They've got a hard line expectation in that subreddit, and I don't think it's unwarranted because I think that they're very, very aware that capitalists can come in and start to McCarthy them, right? That's the big fear, right? And if I was the communist board, like on Reddit, I'd be completely concerned if I was a moderator that, like, what happens if a pro-capitalist moderator comes in and takes over one of these accounts? What happens if a whole bunch of bots start coming in and start brigading them, right? And, like, I'd be very concerned, and I'd be completely concerned for a long time if I was a communism subreddit of McCarthy strain coming through and censoring them and causing them problems and trying to co-opt what's going on and trying to take over, right? And so I think they've got a real zero tolerance, and they'll make it very clear to you very fast. And it makes sense as soon as you understand the basic history of even like modern communism. Like, just look at what happened during the McCarthy era. The McCarthy era alone is enough to make anybody sort of suspicious. I got my little pug down here, so this is what's happening. You're a good boy, buddy. You want some more peanut butter? What a good little boy. What a good little boy. Their Discord banned me for being indifferent to trans people. Apparently it's my bushcraft comrade is trans. Well, and there's something interesting going on in the trans community generally. Like, I just did a video about Halifax Pride split from the libraries, right? Split from the library system in Halifax because the Halifax libraries refused to ban a very transphobic, like overtly transphobic, obviously, even on the surface, book. Abigail Schreier's book. And I mean, for God's sakes, the name of the book is Irreversible Damage, the trans... does she call it a transsexual craze seducing our daughters? That's what it is. The transsexual craze seducing our daughters. Like, that's the title of it. And I mean, her whole thesis is idiotic on its surface. Like, it's so stupid. She comes out in the introduction and is like, there used to be no trans people, and now they're everywhere. I blame the internet. Like, that's literally what she's saying, and it's so dumb. Like, yeah. And honestly, like, what I would love the trans community to start saying about this book, and what I hope they start saying about this book is like, yeah, obviously there were like no trans people that we saw in our culture, and then a whole bunch because we used to beat the shit out of them, right? As early as the 90s, we were beating the shit out of trans people, right? Like, that's really obvious to anyone with a brain in their head, right? That we would beat the shit out of trans people. And so if you're a trans person in the 80s and 90s getting the shit kicked out of you, you don't exactly present, right? You don't stand up and say like, hey, I'm trans, because then you get the shit kicked out of you, right? And then the 2000s happened. There was a whole push to be like pro-gay and lesbian. That became culturally acceptable. And now there's a whole bunch of trans people who finally are feeling, especially trans kids, who are coming into a society where it's no longer acceptable to completely beat the shit out of trans people just because they're trans. And I do mean in slight degrees. Like, I'm sure that trans people encounter this stuff on the regular, but it's got to be less hyper aggressive, and people like Abigail Schreier are just realizing, or not realizing, obviously, because she's so dumb and she's published this idiotic book, but she's being confronted with trans people existing without being destroyed by her colleagues. And the thing that she does need to realize, and that I wish that people would realize, is that there always has been this many trans people. The amount of trans people that you're seeing is the amount of trans people that have existed in our society. They're just no longer getting the shit kicked out of them, right? They're just no longer getting completely ground back into silence and disappeared and invisibilized. So, but if you don't accept the base premise of reality, which is that we beat the shit out of these people, then you can create whatever kind of dumb narrative you like and be like, it must be the internet. And the internet is seducing people, and these people, and even if that were true, the base presumption is that the trans people on the internet who are seducing her daughters are nefarious, right? Like, she's so dumb, it's so obvious. Anyway, so I do this, and I start making this argument, but all of what I've just said there, right, still doesn't mean that I think the Halifax Library should be banning this book, and I certainly don't think that Halifax Pride should be separating themselves from Halifax libraries for doing it. Like, this becomes the classic left eating itself conversation, right, where you have two organizations that butt heads over an issue, and then instead of like coming to terms with it, saying like, I don't necessarily agree with you, but I can see where you're coming from, all of this kind of stuff, and then continuing to forward as allies, they split ways, weaken themselves, and ultimately Abigail Schreier is the one that wins, right? Because now instead of Halifax Pride having these resources and having access to the library system as an ally, well, now they've split. So over this, I get banned from a subreddit, and it's like, oh, okay, Like, and again, it's like another case of the left eating itself. Like, we're not allowed to have disagreements with one another. We get isolated into our own little corners, and we can't collaborate because we have disagreements about these issues. Yeah, Ward, you're right on the money. Wolf and Chomsky talk about the forbidden socialist language in the U.S. compared to other. Yeah, exactly. Like if you we had the McCarthyian era was serious and did serious damage, and we could do that again, right? That could come right on roaring back. The McCarthy period, like people got blacklisted. Like we've made videos about it. The fellow that did Breaking Bad, the lead in Breaking Bad, I forget his name. He did a movie about a writer who got blacklisted over all of this, and it's just like completely, and it's completely aggressive. It's completely crazy, and it could happen again. It could happen again without a doubt. Like it's something I just did a. I just did a survey for YouTube, and I told them straight out. Like, they were like, do you trust YouTube? And I was like, fuck no. And I was 100%. They were like, oh, can you give us a reason why? And I'm like, I'm a communist. I expect a McCarthyist craze will come through and I will get taken off your platform. That's what I expect to see happen. That's why I'm trying to sort of figure out where else I can platform my stuff, but we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I hear J.K. Rowling loves the trans community or communist. Like, yeah. J.K. Rowling, my position on J.K. Rowling is that she is actually attempting to figure out what the hell is going on with the trans community. But she's like a Karen, right? Like, she's just like an upper class, rich white woman who has no idea what to do. And honestly, I feel like if she was having the conversation she was having, not on Twitter, but instead with trans people, like she's like a millionaire, right? Like she can find trans people. She could go talk to them. She doesn't need to speculate. She doesn't need to figure any of this stuff out, right? And honestly, I look at her and I'm just like, yeah, I don't think that she's transphobic. I just think she's out to lunch. I just think she's completely clueless, right? And instead of doing what she should do, which is find some trans people, have some conversations, maybe learn something, right? She's just, using her platform to do what she should do in private, which is figure out what the hell this is all about, right? Which, I mean, that's not unreasonable. I just wish she wasn't fucking doing it in public. And she'll probably think the same as time moves forward, right? Yeah, and because if you don't go, you're 100%, you're a fascist. Yeah, which, that kind of hardline extremist thinking, right? Like, that's a problem. It is. It's a huge problem. Like, we've got to be able to have nuanced decisions. Like, we've got to, everything I just said about the Halifax Pride situation, my critique is strategy. It has nothing to do with trans people or even really the trans community. It's 100% just asking a basic question, which is pursuing the banning of a book a good strategic decision? And the answer is no, right? Like, even, like, it allows the enemies of the trans community to change the conversation in the public sector, in the larger, wider society, away from the horror show that book is, into, oh, well, the trans community, look how authoritarian they are, right? And suddenly you're not talking about Abigail Schreier's transphobia, you are talking about the authoritarianism of the trans community. And the wider society will totally go along with that, right? They'll totally go along with that. So it's a bad strategic decision. It doesn't work. And if you say that out loud, you get banned from communities. You've got to be like a transphobe and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, no, I'm trying to make you win, right? I want you to win. Like, I don't want you to lose. I want you to win. And you don't win by pursuing book bans and alienating your allies. The only strategic argument I can make sense coming from Halifax Pride on this is that they know that their relationship with the library can be sacrificed and the gain that they're getting is the notoriety that the decision creates. But I would be pretty surprised to find out that that's the grounds on which they were making that decision. That they were literally saying, okay, this relationship, this is the chip, and we are spending that chip, we're separating, in order to elevate this book and tell everyone this community wants this book banned. And we are willing to like burn our relationship with the library actively in order to simply create the notoriety around it. They're using a capitalist method to kill us. I wouldn't say it's a capitalist method necessarily. Like, don't go to this library, make their income zero. But that's not how the libraries work, right? The libraries aren't, like, the library system is a socialist system. Like, it's publicly funded completely. Like, they're not a private library. They're not a private system, right? Yeah, there are some wonderfully crazy ideas out there. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and my position on it ultimately is you're better served. Like specific, like the complaint always that's going to come out of the right, and even the centrists, is that, well, you're just saying ban this book. You're not actually speaking to what's bad about the book. Like, why is it bad when I read this thing? And there's obvious arguments for why Abigail Schreier's book is bad, like, and why it's stupid on the face of it. Right? I've just laid it out, right? It completely ignores the history of systemic violence against the trans community, right? Why were there no trans people and now there's a bunch of trans people? Because we used to beat the shit out of them, right? Like, it's very obvious. Like, it's very clear. But if you walk around just saying, ban this book, then everybody's talking about the book ban, and they're not talking about how fucking dumb this dumb person is, right? Anyway. So I got 8 viewers now. Look at that. Okay, I think now's the time, because I don't want to spend this whole time talking about Abigail Schreier and how goddamn stupid her stupid book is, and how ridiculous she is as a person. The fact that she like is gets articles published in the Wall Street Journal, like, it's shameful. Like, it's shameful. Literally, like, the Wall Street Journal, no editor at any point, nobody in the whole journey that she was having. Nobody at any moment. And like, Abigail Schreier really goes out of her way to, all she does is interview people who are interacting with the trans community in a vacuum, right? Like, so she'll interview like a mom whose daughter is watching YouTube, and so the perspective is from this perspective of like total cluelessness, right? And then it's presented as bad from the outset. And literally, she doesn't go interview trans activists. She doesn't interview scientists. She doesn't really interview anyone who's important, who can stand up and say to her, trans people used to get the shit kicked out of them. That's why you didn't see them, right? Okay. We're going to start this up. During this time, I'm still going to talk to people, because it's a lecture, because it's not like Abby Martin's Gaza thing. We can still I'll type things out. I'm going to mute my mic during this, but I'll keep this screen. It'll still look exactly like this. Shock authors and meme makers make good coin. Yeah, she's a book salesman. Yeah, she's a con artist, without a doubt. Well, because the trans thing is popular. It's people are interested in it, and lightning rod conversation brings money, right? I just wish that people would bring on like trans activists and people who are on the side of trans people to be like, we used to get the shit kicked out of us. What do you think happened? Like, and what a sympathetic argument to make for the trans community. Like, idiots like Abigail Schreier stand up and say, like, why were there no trans people? Well, because we got the shit kicked out of us. Like, I don't understand how this is even, like... I just feel like relatively intelligent people... Like, take someone like Joe Rogan, right? Like, Joe Rogan will have a conversation about trans stuff and, like, literally will not put together that, like, oh, homosexuals and lesbians used to get the shit kicked out of them, right? Minorities used to and still get the shit kicked out of them. Trans people, oh, I guess this is new. What's going on? They're so new. There's so many of them. Like, you're a fucking moron. Put two and two together, right? And I bet you if anybody sat in front of Joe Rogan and said, these people used to get the shit kicked out of them, there would be like a light bulb moment where he'd be like, oh yeah, I guess that's fucking true, because he's just such a dumb ape. Doesn't help that trans masculine people in particular have been invisible because everyone's focused on trans feminine people. It's important to talk about them too, of course, but I hate the lost lesbian sister narrative. Elias, now we're treading into territory where you'll know more about it, because I think you're more closely linked into that. I never claimed to be an expert about this. I never claimed to be any of that kind of stuff. But, well, and invisibilizing the entire community is the goal, right? The goal is to make them invisible, which they have been. Like, trans people have been invisible for forever, right? Which is why everybody's like, well, why are there so many of them now? There's the same amount. There's the same amount. There's the same amount. We've just been beating the shit out of them. And of course, you can only speak for yourself, right? And this is my hope, that as we learn about one another, what a beautiful opportunity we have, right? As a people, right? That we finally stop kicking the shit out of trans people to a degree. Let's be straightforward about that, to a degree. And now there's like this new perspective that exists in our society, where suddenly a trans person can stand up, give their viewpoint of the world, and their viewpoint is like this unique, beautiful, like literally you are in one state of being, and you know internally that you should be in this other state of being. And if you look back at how First Nations people dealt with trans people, there's this idea of two spirits, right? That's what they would call them, that they would be two spirits, right? And so there's this general acceptance within like First Nations organizations and tribes about the existence of trans people in their society. And it's like, we are also going, and part of the thing I think that people like Abigail Shrier struggle with is because she has no spiritual self, right? She's just like a narcissistic, idiotic Karen capitalist walking around getting her way. And because she has no sense of her spiritual self, the idea that like there could be a different type of sort of spiritual or existential existence within a physical framework that she, where she at least acknowledges the physical framework and the existence of that to the degree that it benefits her. And so the idea of something that's a little bit more intangible or a little bit more different than what she's used to, oh, well, this is a craze. This is absurd. And it's just like, bitch. And what a beautiful opportunity we have to learn something new and different about the society we live in from this group of people we have historically alienated, and now we don't, and now our kids are coming up watching videos, and they see that there is even the possibility of this, that there is the possibility of like a different existential self within the framework of our physical being and how we interact with one another. And because kids are kids and because they are who they are, they ask questions of themselves without bias, without the like fear or the reprisal, especially if they're doing it very young, right? If you're like 10, 11, 12, right? You're asking yourself these questions and you're not being confronted with the biases of history and you're living in a society where you're not getting the shit kicked out of you. And so then you just like ponder on it and you think about it. And when somebody talks to you, you're like, this sounds right. Like, this sounds correct in what's going on in my life. And like somebody like me, I listen to it and I'm like, it doesn't sound correct for me because I am like a straight white male. Like, this is just what's real. Like, I'm just a straight white dude. And so I listen to what trans people say about their own experience and themselves. And fundamentally, it just lands on like, this is what they think, right? This is this is what they know about themselves, and they know it to be true. And who are we to deny it? Who are we to deny it? If they believe it to be true of themselves, then that's good enough for me, man. Like, that's good enough for me. Like, I just don't, it doesn't, like, I spent a good portion of my life up until my, like, mid-20s being, like, on the wrong side of history on this, on, like, especially with the gay issue, right? I would argue against it, and it's shameful. It's something that I regret very deeply in my life. And then really coming around on just like, well, okay, why would they lie? Like, what's the whole point of that? Like, this is the one thing, like, the whole crowd who's saying like, oh, they're just making this choice and it's weird. It's like, who in your right mind would like make the choice, like the intellectual choice, to be in this kind of community where you get the shit kicked out of you, where you get alienated, where you get, like, that doesn't make any fucking sense at all. Like, it has to be that internally a person just knows this to be true of themselves, and rather than live a lie for the benefit of close-minded conservatives, they want to live the life who they are, and they want to be free to do that. And we should be like, yeah, great. Cool. And I just think we've got a lot to learn about how our society works. Or not even society, how our society. We used to beat the shit out of a lot of people. That teaches us a lot about our society. But also, like, how our existence works, right? For many, the less like themselves someone is, the more they are to be feared. Yeah, it's absolutely true, right? Just fear of the unknown. Simple as that. Just like this, we are a straight, white, male community, and if it is not straight, white, and male, we must fear it. It's so fucking stupid, right? And meanwhile, like, the world is creating, like, all of this, like, energy and beauty and different ways of living and different beings, and there's color and all of this kind of stuff, and there's just a person who wants to live in, like, a black and white, dreary, drab, I wear a suit, and I go to a 9-to-5 job, and I have a ham sandwich at 12 noon every day, go home, eat chicken and potatoes, watch news, drink beer, sleep, wake up, go again, and on weekends I sit on the dock and fish. And that's it. That's their whole fucking life. And they don't, and if somebody came up to them and said, like, hey, how about instead of, like, wearing black and white and living in this black and white world, we put, like, a little bit of pink over here, a little bit of yellow, or sparkles, or sunshine, or any of that kind of stuff, and they would just be like, no, I like my ham sandwich at noon and my chicken in the evening and news and beer and sleep and work. And I'm not always, obviously, but I've definitely come to believe that when you live in a repressive society where your life has been, like, you've got to be on these rails, right? You are either straight male or straight female, and if you deviate from this, we literally will beat the shit out of you and cause you problems in, like, physical and financial ways. And I've just come to believe that a big reason why people don't want to even contemplate the existence of homosexuality, lesbianism, or trans, or any of that kind of stuff is because if you accept that these things exist in the world around you, and here they are, then fundamentally you need to turn the question on yourself and say, if that is acceptable, right, then am I that? And that's the scariest moment, especially if you are in a society that is still homophobic or still transphobic, right? Because it means that if you turn the question on yourself and reveal that yes, you are, that to live your truest self, that means you need to alienate yourself from your community. And that's why it persists, right? Because it's terrifying to do this. It's terrifying to do this. It's terrifying to stand up in a homophobic and transphobic society and say, I am this, right? And if you still are, then you can't accept it. You can't accept it because asking the question means you have to ask the question of yourself. And it can't be done. All right. Okay, I feel like I've been talking about this issue for forever and a day. And Elias, if I ever say anything that you feel I'm speaking out of turn, clap back, okay? Because I don't want to alienate people. I don't want to speak for communities that, like, I am a straight white male standing on the periphery of that community, looking in, being like, yeah, what's the problem? That's right. Hi Nick, how you doing? Thanks for popping in. And I say that to any trans, anybody who's from any perspective, I am only here to help, and I will change my narrative on a dime. I will change my narrative on a dime. I'm happy to do it, because I'm an outsider looking in, or I'm on the outside looking at what's happening, and there's deeper and more intrinsic things. I feel like there is going to be like a trans right activist, or maybe there already is, and I just haven't found it, who is just going to be a powerhouse in this regard, and is going to be able to fully articulate what it is to be a trans person, or what that sensation and what that existence is, and how you view things, and why it changes your perspective in a way that's going to really be powerful. And I look forward to it. Hi mom. Hey everybody, Mary Wheeler is my mother. Hey, how you doing today, Mom? Okay, Mom, this is what we're doing. I just spoke about trans rights and all that kind of fun stuff, and we're just going to get off of it now. We're going to watch Tony Seba, right? This is going to be about an hour. What's great about this is trans is less frightening than commie for many. Oh, man. I don't know what to make of that, Ward, honestly. I mean, I guess I hope that's true. Oh, okay. We're going to watch Tony Seba give a lecture about the disruption that's going to occur, that may have already occurred if it wasn't for this pandemic, of electric vehicles in the fossil fuel vehicle market, and then we're going to talk about it afterwards, because I think this is actually a message of hope that comes from I do lives. Mom, I've told you this. I live stream 6 to 9 every single weekday. I'm surprised it's taken you this long to get here, honestly. Okay, I'm gonna hit play on this. I'm gonna shut down my mic. We're gonna hit play on this. I'm still gonna type and talk in the chat as this is going on. Any questions or comments or any kind of stuff, we can have a back and forth, because it's just a lecture. I don't think there's much of a visual component, really. And nope, I'm in the wrong spot. In the wrong spot. Okay, gonna turn off my audio input. Okay.
I want to take you into the future of energy and transportation. And when I say future, I don't mean 50 years from now. I mean 5 years, 10 years from now. But before I do that, I want to take you into the past. This is New York City, 1900, Easter Parade. We used horses for thousands of years as our main means of transportation, we human beings. There is one car in this picture. Can anyone see the one car in that picture? Okay, I don't have all night. There. There is one car in New York City, Easter Parade, 1900. 13 years later, can anyone see the horse in that picture? 13 years later, New York City went from all horse, -1, to all cars. That horse doesn't even look like a horse. This is called a disruption, a technology disruption, and that's my work. Let me take you to 1985, when, yeah, exactly. When the then largest telecom company on earth, monopoly, AT&T, had this thing called the cell phone, and they hired McKinsey & Company to essentially do a forecast. What's going to be the adoption of this thing called the cell phone in 15 years? So by the year 2000, how many subscribers will we have in the United States? So McKinsey went off and did whatever it is that they do and charged $5 million for. And they came back and this was the answer. 900,000 by the year 2000. The actual number was 109 million. That's not a small mistake. That's a factor of 120 times, right? So when you see the projections from the International Energy Agency and so on and so forth, think about that, about what mainstream analysts are trying to sell you. By being disrupted, AT&T not only, its landline business went down, but also it missed out on some of the biggest legal market opportunities of the 21st century. If you just look at the top 15 listed companies, internet and mobile, essentially that's $2.4 trillion in market valuation. And so by missing out on a disruption, your business goes away, but also you don't participate in the new opportunities afforded by the new disruption. And it's usually the experts and the insiders, very smart people usually, who dismiss disruptive opportunities. Why would anyone, 10 years ago, why would anyone buy the iPhone, the $600 iPhone, when they could buy the $100 Nokia, right? It didn't make sense. So, these are very smart people. The internet, let's not make a big deal out of that. So part of my work, and again, and again, and again, should I even talk about Kodak? No? Some of you don't even know what that is, right? The year 2000 was a record year in photography worldwide. Record revenues, record profits, record number of print photos, and 12 years later, they were bankrupt. 12 years later. And if anybody had stood up there in 2000 and said, there's this thing called a digital camera, which, by the way, Kodak invented. Yeah, so it's not like they didn't know what was coming, right? So that's another disruption. So my work, in many ways, over the last decade or so, has been to answer this question. Why do smart people in smart organizations consistently fail to anticipate, let alone lead, market disruptions? So I developed a framework to understand technology disruption. That there are many ways of disrupting. I could talk about this for an hour. I'll just walk you through a few things, and then I'll dive into energy and transportation. So one of the most important things to consider is technology cost curves. So if you look at Silicon Valley is built on this, on Moore's law. And Moore's law says that on a dollar basis, computing power has essentially doubled every 2 years for decades. So it improves at about 41% rate per year with the same dollar, right? So when you look at it over 20 years, essentially we can, this $600 iPhone has the computing power of what a computer 20 years ago would have cost $600,000. And 40 years ago, that same computer would have cost $600 million. And 60 years ago, that same computer would have been $600 billion. So that's the power of technology cost curves, right? Especially when they improve exponentially. So in energy, we have several cost curves for technologies that essentially all of which will, as I'm going to show you, enable disruptions of energy and transportation. One of them is lithium ion batteries, which from about, so I'll come back to this. The other one being solar photovoltaics, which have improved dramatically since at least 1970. Now, one important concept is that of technology convergence. So single technologies in and of themselves are not what cause disruptions. Essentially, when you have several technologies that converge at basically and can enable the, on a cost basis, on a financially viable basis, can enable certain functionalities that were not possible before. So for the smartphone, that year was 2007. That was the year when computing and digital imaging and touchscreen technology and lithium ion batteries and so on made it possible for someone to create a smartphone. It turned out to have been Google and Apple who created the Android and the iPhone, but it could have been somebody else. It could have been, Nokia, for instance, Motorola, anybody, really. And so the concept of technology convergence is very important. It's when several technologies and business model innovation converge at one point in time to enable certain functionality at a certain cost. The other important thing is the concept that technologies get adopted as an S-curve. So again, when you look at mainstream projections, say of EVs or solar and whatnot, you see a linear projection. No technology in history, successful technology in history, right, that I know of, has ever been adopted on a linear basis, ever. It gets adopted as an S-curve. Once you hit that tipping point, essentially, so this is the example of color TV. So essentially it can move sideways for a long time, and then when it hits that tipping point, it disrupts the existing market and it gets adopted. It grows exponentially, super exponentially, in weeks, in months, in a few years. And this is how disruptions happen, because people look at it and they're like, it's only 1-2% of the market, and then boom, it's 80% of the market in no time. And that's because of that technology convergence, which made it possible for entrepreneurs to create new products and services. Now, the interesting thing about S-curves is not only that they're exponential, but it's getting even steeper, meaning that disruptions are happening even more quickly. So if you look at the turn of the 1900s, the S-curves were long, so it would take years, decades for products to get adopted by the market. And look at it now. It happens in years. I mean, in some cases, in months. So the exponential is actually getting even more exponential these days. And that's because of the internet, that's because we're a more global society and so on. A huge thing in disruption is business model innovation. And business model innovation is every bit as disruptive as technology, every bit. So Uber, a little company called Uber, which did not even exist 10 years ago. Actually, they started 2009. And today, their bookings are higher than the whole taxi industry in America. Okay? 8 years, 8 years. So whoever is going to tell you that disruptions in transportation cannot happen in 10 years, well, look at Uber. Look at what they've done in less than 10 years. And they're just getting started. They're doubling every year. It's unbelievable. So they're a business model innovation that was enabled by two things, the cloud and smartphones. So essentially, they took advantage of that convergence and disintermediated this very inefficient market, taxis. Same thing with Airbnb. That's a business model innovation. It's actually an old business model. They're a broker. I mean, we've had brokers for hundreds of years, but not in this market. So that business model was enabled, again, by a convergence of technologies that made it possible for someone to do that. So business model is as disruptive as technology is. So I took this framework that I created, that it included bits and pieces of a lot of thought leaders and so on. And essentially, I wrote this book called Clean Disruption. And that was 3 years ago. And essentially, that's what I'm going to talk about today and follow-on work that I have done. What it says is that there are 5 technologies plus business model innovation that over the next 13 years or so are going to disrupt all of energy and transportation as we know it. And it's going to happen for purely economic reasons, essentially. So let me walk you through some of these technologies. Batteries. Lithium-ion batteries improved by about 14% per year from about 95 to about 2010. 14%, that's the cost curve. And then two new industries came into, and that's what we used for cell phones and laptops and so on. And then $2 trillion industries, auto and energy, came into lithium-ion. And guess what happened next? It accelerated. So over the next few years, it accelerated to 16% from 2010 to about 2014. And over the last 6 years, right now, to our knowledge, there are about 12 mega factories of lithium-ion batteries. Huge, we hear about the Tesla gigafactory. Well, there are just about 12 going up around the world. And this means what? More investments, more R&D, more scale, and guess what happened? The cost curve for lithium-ion since 2010 to 2016 was 20% per year. So it went down from about $1,000 to about $200. Insane, right? And it's still accelerating. So we may yet, so I'm going to show you how that can be disruptive. So Dyson, right? Dyson makes vacuum cleaners, right? They bought lithium-ion company from Detroit, and they're going to invest £1 billion in batteries. And they're getting into the electric vehicle market. What? Dyson? Dyson? Hello, right? I mean, isn't a car difficult to build? Talk about a clean disruption, right? Dyson. And sorry, I couldn't resist. Yeah, so I'll tell you why Dyson and any high school kid actually can build an electric vehicle. I'll tell you that in a few minutes. But so batteries, just the cost curve going down, essentially you can map out over the next few years, assuming that it's going to continue at that rate, what markets it can disrupt. So again, the convergence for different markets happens at different times. So storage, for instance, on a utility scale, on the grid is essentially a just-in-time system. So every time we switch, we flip a switch, the utility generates more, and in the summer especially, when we use air conditioning, and summer is pretty long here, right? There's a lot of sunshine. Essentially, it's a just-in-time system where we generate basically microseconds before or after the demand. What that means is that it's a very inefficient industry. It's built for the peak. So if you look at Con Edison, New York, just about a third of their generating assets are used less than 6% of the year. 6%. So some of it is used a few hours every year. That's a very expensive way to produce energy. And up to now, we then have storage to essentially compete with that peak, essentially when we needed that summer peak. And in my book, essentially, a 6% asset utilization is a disruption waiting to happen. And in fact, it is starting to happen, and even conventional energy CEOs are saying that by 2020, there may never be another peaker ever built in the US. Peakers are usually natural gas and so on. But even now, this is not 2020. If you look at what happened in California last year, the huge natural gas leak and so on, the Public Utility Commission in California ordered Southern California Edison to put up batteries, essentially for the peak. And Tesla built it in 88 days, okay? 88 days, right? Try that with a nuclear power plant or with a coal power plant, 88 days. So the disruption of peakers has already started. Essentially, this is disrupting what otherwise would have been natural gas peakers in California. Now, it's not just at that level. Business model innovation, like I said, is disruptive, and there are companies who are providing storage as a service to companies. So companies, for instance, in New York, Connecticut, demand charges, so on a per kilowatt basis, are up to 50% of the cost of energy. Not what you consume, but demand charges. So what these companies are doing is essentially saying, I'll put up a battery behind the meter, and essentially I will charge you if I save money. If you save money, I want 50%. Talk about a business model innovation, right? So essentially they're going to the 7-Elevens of the world and the hotels of the world and saying, I'll put this storage behind the meter so that we can store when energy is cheap, and then you can use it when it's expensive. And they say that that lowers utility bills by 10 to 50%. Now, this is not efficiency. I mean, these companies are using the exact number of kilowatt hours, but they're using it in a different way. They're storing some of it to use later. So I've done some numbers on the cost curve of batteries, and by 2020 or so, it'll cost the average American consumer about $1 a day. It's actually improving to basically store 24 hours of electricity. $1 a day, that's $30 a month, right? Now, you don't need to store a whole day. You don't need to store 24 hours to disrupt the utility. All you need to store is 4 to 6 hours. That's it, right? Because that's the peak. That is the most profitable part of a lot of utilities, the peak, right? So 4 hours essentially are gonna cost, 20 cents a day. That's it, by 2020. Boom, disruption, okay? And people are gonna do it because it's gonna be in their best selfish economic interest. They're gonna put up storage because it's gonna save them money, okay? And this is why you see whole islands going solar in months, because the cost of solar plus storage is already cheaper than diesel generation, which is what powers most islands. Solar plus storage is already cheaper than, and that's why you see, and you're gonna continue to see a lot of islands go 100%. We're not talking 2050, we're talking now, because it's already cheaper. So batteries are becoming so cheap that essentially, because of economic reasons, everyone, houses, malls, parking spaces, buildings are gonna have storage. And they're gonna have storage because it makes sense. Just like we have data storage. Imagine a computer without data storage. Well, energy storage is gonna be just like that. Just like data storage is to computers, energy storage is gonna be to housing. Now, what batteries are gonna enable is another disruption, which is the electric vehicle disruption. So first let's ask, is the electric vehicle disruptive? Yes, it's clean and all that, but is it disruptive? So Tesla has been named the best car ever made. Best car, not best EV, best car ever made. And Consumer Reports gave them a rating of 103 out of 100, right? I'm not making it up. That's Consumer Reports, right? Isn't there a movie like that? 11, right? It's not 10, it's 11, because basically it was off the charts. And that's what electric vehicles are. But of course, who can afford an electric vehicle? Not me. I actually don't own a car. I actually, for 10 years, I have not owned a car. Thank you. Now, I did it for selfish economic reasons. Yeah, I mean, owning a car, I'll come back to why that is. Not really, but I did the numbers, and it makes no sense to own a car. So, is the EV disruptive? So let me walk you through a couple of 4 things, and I have like 9. One is that the internal combustion engine automobile is 17 to 21% efficient. So essentially, 80% of the gasoline in the tank or diesel goes up in smoke, literally, or heat. 80% waste. And the electric vehicle is about 95% efficient. So 95% or so of the energy in the battery is actually turned into usable energy. That's 5 times. Now, that has been the case for a long time. The disruption hasn't happened, but this is disruptive when you combine it with the fact that electrons are cheaper to transmit, to distribute, than atoms, right? So electricity is cheaper than gasoline or diesel. When you combine those two things, what you find is that to charge on a per mile basis, an EV is about 10 times cheaper than basically ICE cars, than internal combustion engine automobiles. 10x. Every time you see a 10x in a cost basis, you can see a disruption. So this is your car. You don't have an electric vehicle. The internal combustion engine automobile has 2,000 plus moving parts, 2,000. The ICE vehicle, the EV has 20. Okay, let me repeat that. 2,000, 20. That's 100 times fewer parts than the internal combustion engine automobile, 100 times. Which means anyone who owns an EV knows it, maintenance is essentially, let's say 10x cheaper, right? Not to say free, because a lot of EV companies are offering free maintenance. Why? Because they can. Because, basically, when you look at folks, and I've talked to a lot of them who have used their EVs for hundreds of thousands of miles, they tell me that their biggest cost is basically tires. That's our biggest maintenance cost, tires. So try that with your ICE vehicle. And the other thing that's disruptive that doesn't get talked about a lot is that the electric vehicle can go about 500,000 miles. Now, on average, we drive about 10,000 miles a year. 10,000. 500,000, we would need 50 years, to take advantage of this. And who uses the same car for 50 years? Not unless you're in Cuba or something, not going to happen, right? So, this is something about EVs that is underplayed. And in fact, Tesla and others are building a 1,000,000-mile EV. Now, 1 million miles. 100 miles driving the same car. Does that make sense? Well, I'll come back to that and why that makes sense. But if we still had the individually owned model that we have today, where we all own our cars, essentially, and it was a one-to-one disruption, essentially EVs would compete with ICE vehicles. This is the cost curve. In 2014, I drew this cost curve based on what I knew about lithium-ion batteries and so on. And what it says, essentially, is that by 2017 or 18, the market would essentially launch several electric vehicles with 200-mile range, at least, because that's what I thought was minimum you need to go to the mainstream consumer, for $35,000 to $40,000 unsubsidized. And that's what I predicted. And even 3 years ago, what did folks tell me about that prediction? You're insane, right? Not going to happen. Guess what did happen? So let me tell you what did happen. But what this says is essentially that even the low end, so the average American car is $33,000 to buy, the sticker price. 33. So if you're going to compare 33,000 EV against 33,000 ICE, it's a no-brainer, right? Because 90% less maintenance, 90% less energy, and so on and so forth, more powerful. And so it makes total economic sense for you to buy an electric vehicle. And the cost curve is even going further down. And you're going to have, by 2022, 200-mile EVs, $20,000. $20,000, 200-mile EVs, unsubsidized. So essentially what this says is that by 2025 or so, even if I'm wrong by a couple of years, by 2025, everything that moves, road transportation, buses and tractors and trucks and cars, every vehicle is going to be electric. Boom, over, right? Every new vehicle. Now, some folks may keep their cars for a few years, but when they go to buy a new one, it's going to make no economic sense to buy a combustion engine. But this is not what's going to happen. I'll tell you what's going to happen in a few. So what has happened is exactly what I predicted, which is $35,000 to $40,000 EVs that go to 100 miles by 2017, 2018. So GM just has their Bolt. Tesla Model 3 announced $35,000 or so. Who basically here has given $1,000 to Tesla? Oh my goodness, there you go. There you go. You and 400,000 other people. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure you were awake. I just flew in from Sydney. I wanted to make sure I was awake, actually. So if they actually sell, and the first day they had 180,000 people give $1,000 each. And this gives you an idea of the latent demand in the market. And they raised $400 million. This is the biggest crowdfunding event in history. They did not need an investment bank to raise $400 million. Talk about another disruption. We can talk about that another time. The biggest disruption, though, and the biggest enabler is going to come from autonomous vehicles. Today, if you want, you can take a self-driving taxi in Singapore. Today. This is not in the future. I mean, the deep learning, machine learning, artificial intelligence has improved just over the last 5 years more than it did, the previous 30 years. I mean, that's what I studied at MIT, computer science, and focused on AI. And the progress over the last few years has been insane. And Uber also has announced that they're doing self-driving rides in Pittsburgh. So basically this is happening today, and a whole host of companies are doing it today. 33 companies are investing billions of dollars, and look at the names. This is not just startup companies in Silicon Valley, it's gone mainstream. And I'll tell you why in a moment, but they're investing heavily. Ford's new CEO came from its self-driving division. And the first hire that he made came from Uber's self-driving division. So, you know, coincidence? Right? Now Tesla, back to Tesla, they say, Elon Musk, that by the end of this year, every Tesla will be able to go from a parking lot in San Francisco to a parking lot in New York with no human control. This year. We're talking about 2017. Even if he's off by a bit, I mean, these things are happening right now. Now, that's only level 3. That's not level 5 or 4, which is what you need to go fully autonomous. Essentially, computer on wheels. You know, essentially 20 moving parts, 4 wheels. It's a computer built. And Tesla says that they're going to have level 5 autonomy, no pedals, no steering wheel, by 2019. 2019. Now, you know, this is not, again, in the future, far future. Now, I'm assuming 2021 just for the next argument, but you know, Tesla may well get there in 2019, and others may well get there before. So this is happening very quickly. So what about the cost? So if you read the media, if you read the mainstream analysts, they will tell you that, oh, autonomous vehicles are kind of expensive. And I'll show you 2 of the key technologies that essentially make an autonomous vehicle possible. So this is what a self-driving car sees when it uses a technology called a sensor called LiDAR. And LiDAR is laser and radar. So it emits basically laser pulses, about 1 million laser pulses per second that bounce back basically 300 to 600 feet, 360 degrees. And they bounce back, and essentially with that, you have a supercomputer in the trunk, and it creates a view of the world, basically around it in real time. So this is what an autonomous vehicle sees. What is the cost of LiDAR sensors? In 2012, Google said $70,000. And of course, mainstream analysts said what? Not gonna happen, right? Not until 2050 or something, right? What did happen, in fact, was that the following year, it was $10,000. And the year after that, a Silicon Valley company announced the $1,000 LiDAR. So from 70K to 1K within a few years. But wait, there's more. That same company announced last year the $250 LiDAR. And that is solid state, which means it doesn't move like the current LiDAR. You can focus it, so it's much superior technology at $250. Even if you use 4 of these, right, you're still talking about $1,000. Now, what about supercomputing power? Which, and the $90 LiDAR is coming. The size of a postage stamp. You can use it with your iPhone. I don't know what you're going to do with it, but you can. I mean, you'll soon be able to. Serious. I mean, so what about supercomputing power, which is what we need to basically for these vehicles, computers on wheels, to actually happen? So I'll show you the cost curve for supercomputing power. This was the world's first 1 teraflops computer. Doesn't matter what a teraflops is, it's a geeky thing, but so trillion floating point operations per second, if you want to know. So this cost about $50 million in the year 2000. And it was used at Sandia National Labs to do nuclear simulations and so on. So 50 million, year 2000. Last year, a 2 teraflops computer. This, did I say it was the size of this room? Yeah, so it was the size of this room. Now you can hold 2 teraflops in your hand for $50. 2 teraflops. So that's how quickly it's going, or it has gone. And this same company, NVIDIA, announced that by the end of this year, they're going to have the 20 teraflops computer, GPU, that you need to run a self-driving car. That's what they say you need. 20 teraflops, it's coming at the end of this year. And on top of that, it basically has an operating system for artificial intelligence that you're going to need for these cars. So essentially, almost any entrepreneur can build a self-driving car. And NVIDIA also says that they expect about 1,000x improvement by 2025. So over the next 8 years, 1,000 times, whatever it is that self-driving or other AI functionality is going to improve by about 1,000 times. And that's just the hardware. The real improvement in artificial intelligence has been in the software, and 1,000 times over the next 8 years. And things are going to accelerate this. So disruptions have what I call disruption accelerators, and open source is one of them. So an entrepreneur in San Francisco actually, with parts, built his own self-driving car with $50,000 that he spent on Alibaba and Amazon and eBay, spare parts, $50,000, built his own, one person, one engineer in a garage, literally in San Francisco. And he said, what I want to do is sell $1,000 kits to retrofit cars and make them self-driving. And then, essentially, he decided, I'll just open source it. So now anybody, anywhere, India, China, Germany, anywhere, Kenya, can download software for free to do essentially self-driving cars. Boom, right? And then a few $100s for the GPU, a few $100s for the LiDAR, you're in business. You're in business. I mean, essentially a $2,000 investment could make your car autonomous. Now, okay, so why is that disruptive? Yeah, we'll be able to not drive and do Twitter or whatever it is, Facebook or Instagram or anything, not driving, because there's not going to be a steering wheel. But is that really disruptive? Let me tell you about my latest work. Essentially, that came out about 4 weeks ago. It's called Disruption of, so basically I double-clicked on clean disruption. I started a think tank about a year ago, focused on disruptions. And our first, essentially, report is the disruption of transportation. And We call it transport as a service, and this is what's going to happen. We use our cars, we pay, we meaning the average American family, about $10,000 a year to own a car, $10,000 a year. And yet, we only use it 4% of the time. 4% of the time, and 96% of the time, it's parked. And in fact, parking space is usually more expensive than your car, okay? That's subsidized by society. But of course, we don't know this. But 4% asset utilization is a disruption waiting to happen. So what's the disruption? The convergence of three things. Electric vehicles. Remember that $500,000 EV? Well, as individual owners, we can't really take advantage of that. So electric vehicles, self-driving, and ride-hailing. So imagine Uber or Lyft without a driver and electric. So when that happens, essentially, vehicle asset utilization goes from 4% of the time to, say, 40% of the time. That's a 10x improvement. So cars are going to be running around, picking you up at home, taking you to work, picking somebody else up and taking them to the supermarket and so on. And instead of 10,000 miles per year, they're going to be driving 100,000 miles per year. And that's where essentially an EV, which can last 500,000 and soon will last 1 million, right, miles, shines, because they can last 5 years, the same vehicle, whereas the internal combustion engine automobile usually lasts 140,000 miles. Even if you push it to 200,000. So even at 200,000, that is less than a year and a half if you run it like an Uber, autonomous, right? It can't compete against a 500,000 miles EV. Does that make sense? So when you compare autonomous, electric, and on-demand with autonomous, ICE, on-demand, essentially the ICE can't compete. Combustion engine cannot compete. So we did the numbers, comparing all, permutations of on-demand versus individual ownership and ICE versus EV and so on and so forth. And, essentially, if a company competes, they say, oh, I'm going to be the Uber, and I'm going to use the same internal combustion engine automobile, they can't compete because this is the cost of a EV, autonomous electric vehicle, and this is the cost of a ICE. So they either go bankrupt or they're going to have to move their fleet to electric. So in the end, it's all going to be electric because of that. Why? For purely economic reasons. So let's assume that 2021 is when we have autonomous vehicles, the technology, and they're approved by the regulators to essentially go on open roads. Not all, they could be geofenced over the first couple of years. Essentially, the day that autonomous vehicles are approved, the cost of transportation on a per mile basis is going to be 10 times cheaper with transport as a service by AVs than it is to own a car, a combustion engine car. 10 times. Now, every time, did I say that this is my work, disruption? Okay, so I have looked at disruptions all the way back to Gutenberg, the printing press. When the first book, the first Bible, came out of Gutenberg's printing press, it was 10 times cheaper than a manuscript Bible. 10x. Every time that there has been a 10x improvement in cost on a same product or service basis, there has been a disruption. Every single time. I know of no case where a 10x did not lead to a disruption. So on day one in 2021, that's going to happen. What are we going to do if we own a car already? Then we may drive it for a little bit. But if you're going to buy a new car, 2021, essentially here's what you're going to decide. Do I want to spend 10 grand a year over the next 5 years? Or do I want to spend $1,000 a year over the next 5 years? No brainer, right? I mean, essentially, you're not going to buy a new car, period. And even if you are driving your existing car, even if you're driving a car that essentially your uncle gave you, free, right? That you already paid off. That's going to be up to 4 times more expensive on a per mile basis than AEV. 4 times. So you're going to be like, wait a second. I paid off my car, and yet the cost of gasoline and insurance and maintenance and so on is 4 times more expensive than taking this transport as a service. And by the way, I don't have to drive. So as people give up their cars, essentially what's going to happen is that the used car industry is going to collapse because nobody's going to buy new cars. It doesn't make sense to buy new cars. And in fact, I think that there's going to be a negative value of used cars. Negative, not just zero resale value, but negative. I mean, you're going to have to pay people to take a car off your hands. But look at the car companies. They're going to have to compete with 2 things: used cars at 0 and AEV, which is 10 times cheaper. What do you think is going to happen? Who's going to buy a new car? So that's the collapse of the auto industry, of the internal combustion engine automobile. Boom, it's over. And it's also the demise of the individual ownership of cars. Now, every technology, like I said, successful, and certainly a 10x difference in cost would be one, grows in SCurves, right? Gets adopted as SCurves. So essentially what we modeled was that assuming 2021 is the year when autonomous vehicles are approved, it may be a year or 2 after, but whatever it is, it's going to be a 10-year disruption. So assuming it's 2021, by 2030, essentially 95% of all passenger miles are going to be autonomous electric vehicles. By 2030, 95%. Boom. Right, there goes the internal combustion engine industry. There goes the individual model of ownership of cars. So we're going to have cars as a service, just like we have movies as a service and music as a service and software as a service and so on. So it's the end pretty much of internal combustion engine and individual ownership of cars. So if you have cars that are going around basically 40% of the time, you're going to need fewer cars. So what we modeled was essentially what came out of our simulations. We need a fleet that's 80% smaller of cars. We're going to have 80% fewer cars on the road. Yeah, that's because they're going to go around. Yeah. So, what happens to parking space? Gone. What happens to insurance? Car insurance? Gone, right? And a whole host of other things get disrupted. I did the numbers for Los Angeles, and the parking space that's going to open up in LA, you can fit 3 cities the size of San Francisco. 3 cities, right? So, I mean, does LA want to create the wealth of 3 San Franciscos? Or do they want a desert in the middle of Los Angeles? So basically, these are the decisions that that they're going to have to start making, and we're all going to have to start making because we're going to have a lot of empty parking space. Demand, like I said, is going to collapse for new vehicles because we're going to need fewer new vehicles. And so because the AV lasts longer, essentially manufacturing new demand for new vehicles is going to go down by 70%. So we need 80% fewer cars that last longer, so we need 70% fewer cars. So essentially, what does that mean for oil? Here's what that means. This is all about the economics. I mean, this is all about the economics. Oil demand is going to peak 2020. And essentially, it's going to go down at about 100 million barrels per day, and it's going to go down to about 70 million barrels by 2030. By 2030, so it's going to go down 30%. So a lot of the investments that are being made now in oil, gone, right? Which ones? Well, the expensive oil, because in oil, in the business, all you need, because it's so inelastic on both the demand and the supply side, essentially a 2 million barrel oversupply in the market, as we learned in 2014, can make the market crash, the prices crash. And that's going to happen as soon as 2021, assuming that autonomous vehicles are approved 2021. And the equilibrium price is going to be $25. So any oil that's produced that can't compete at 25, essentially is unviable. Unviable, and it's going to be stranded. Any oil that can't compete at 25 is going to be stranded. Boom, right? Now, if you look at what oil is produced, cannot compete, essentially, deep water, gone. Shale oil, gone. Sands, gone. Because they can't compete at 25, period. So essentially, conventional oil is going to be the only oil that may survive in those markets because it can't compete at 25. So the whole geopolitics of oil is going to change, and depending on where you are in this market. But essentially, the disruption of prices is going to happen as soon as 2021 or 2. And so all the assets, by the way, what this means is all the assets, refineries, pipelines, and so on, associated with the expensive oil are also going to be stranded. Now, what would those be? Higher? Gasoline stations, gone. But what about pipelines? What pipelines are going to be stranded? Anyone? Anyone? So any pipelines that basically, should I name names? Out of Canada to basically gone, right? Because that oil is going to be gone. So it's going to be stranded. Anything out of Bakken, essentially, is going to be stranded. Oil pipelines. And that's going to happen over the next 5 years, not 20. So if you're investing on a 10-year basis, well, check that out. Okay, so the last disruption that I'm going to talk about is solar. So solar is a technology, just like everything that I'm talking about. I mean, these are technologies. And, I spend quite a bit of time in Denmark these days, for whatever reason. But solar, this is a school in Denmark, in Copenhagen. Now, Copenhagen is 3 degrees south of Juneau, Alaska, right? And this school generates 50% of its energy, annual energy demand, with solar in Denmark. So, the excuses that, well, we don't get enough sunshine or whatnot, don't actually, basically, there's so much proof that, in the summer, what do you do in the summer, right? 50%. Do you see the solar here? Where's the solar? Huh? It's the walls. It's the walls, essentially. It's integrated. It's the walls. That's the solar. The whole building is one solar power plant. It's beautiful, isn't it? Yeah. So, it doesn't matter if you're in Alaska. Solar works. And it's very cheap. Since the year 1970, in 1970, it was $100 per watt. And now it's 30 cents. That's a 300-time improvement. It's gone down by about 11.5% every year since 1970. And every year, essentially, the propaganda is, so it can't possibly go down further. Guess what happens? It keeps going down further without breakthroughs. This is just the cost curve of solar. And despite all the, hoo-ha and all the negative press and all that, solar, the installed base, has doubled every 2 years since the year 2000. This is on a global basis. That is basically a growth compounded of 40% per year. Doubled every 2 years since the year 2000. Now, solar is about 1.5% of generation. So remember that little internal combustion engine automobile in the middle of that street in New York? It's about 1%, 1.5%. Now, if it keeps doubling, and it's doubling every 2 years, how many years until solar is 100% of the world's generation of energy? Let's do the numbers. So 1.5%, let's double it every two years. 3%, one doubling, 6, 12%, 24, 48, 96. 6 doublings. Say I'm wrong by a couple of years. 7 doublings, that is 14 years. So essentially, by 2030 or so, solar, if it keeps growing like this, and remember, SCurves, right? Exponential. It's going to be 100% of the world's energy generation. Whoa, right? Can it really do it? I mean, you can do anything on a spreadsheet, but let's see the economics, right? Let's do the trends in conventional energy versus solar. All of conventional energy, nukes and gas and coal and so on, have gone up by about 6 to 16 times since the year 1970. 6 to 16 times up, while solar has gone down by 300 times, right? So when you put that together, since 1970, solar has improved by about 5,000 times versus petroleum and natural gas, by about 1,800 times versus coal. And again, did I say solar PV is a technology? It's going to keep going down. So, we've talked about this thing called grid parity, right? And grid parity is the point at which solar on the rooftop is as cheap, or the same rate, or even cheaper than what we pay the utility. And it's important, according to Deutsche Bank, by the end of this year, 2017, solar will be at or below grid parity in 80% of global markets. That is not bad for an industry in crisis, right? 80% of world markets, solar will be at or below utility rates. So it's just a matter of economics. It's going to happen, right? And what a lot of folks are not talking about is that companies are going solar because it makes economic sense. So according to PwC, 69% of corporations are actively pursuing solar because it's cheap, right? It doesn't mean that they're going to buy it now, but at least it's in the consideration set. And companies like Apple are going 100%, and Facebook, and Amazon, and IKEA, and so on. Why? Because it makes economic sense. Because when you're Apple and you have data centers, your biggest cost in a data center is what? Energy. And can anyone say that they're going to give you the same rate for 25 years? No brainer, right? For Apple to go 100% solar. It makes total economic sense. And even, this is Mandalay Bay Casino, which essentially put up solar on all its rooftop that generates 25% of its energy. And they want to get off the grid. I mean, they want to basically buy in the open market because they're like, we can buy solar today, which is cheaper than, what we're paying the utility. And so because of this, because we are at grid parity in so many markets, the S-curve may actually accelerate. It may go way beyond the 40%. So I invented a new term, right? I call it God parity, not grid parity. Now, what is that? Essentially, when the cost of solar on your rooftop, unsubsidized, falls below the cost of transmission. So think about that. Cost of transmission, which is anywhere from 7 to 12 cents. Anything that is centrally generated, right? Coal, nukes, you name it, whatever. Anything, even if they can generate at zero, which is not possible, but if they go to CERN, to Switzerland, and they bring that God particle, and they're able to generate at zero, when you add that 7 to 12 cents of transmission, you're still not going to be able to compete with self-generation. Does that make sense? That's what I call God parity. At that point, and this is just solar generation, solar plus storage, and so by 2020, in places like Colorado, you'll be able to generate unsubsidized solar at 4 cents. 4 cents on the rooftop. Central generation, boom, gone. It's going to be obsolete because there's going to be so much generation in homes and businesses, at the malls and parking lots and so on and so forth, right? Because it's going to make economic sense. because when the sun shines, and I think it shines here about 2,000 hours per year, essentially, there is no cheaper form of energy generation than solar on your rooftop. Okay, so essentially utility scale, gone, right? Anything central generation essentially can't compete with self-generation. And even when you add the cost of storage, which is going down by about 20%, by about 2020, you should be able to buy solar plus storage at about 7 cents. 7 cents. So solar plus storage is going to be still less than the cost of transmission. At that point, everyone, everywhere, is going to make selfish, when you make the selfish economic decision, it's going to be to go solar. And that's going to happen by 2020. This is only 3 years away. And that's when basically the curve, the S-curve, really accelerates, because it's going to be in everyone's selfish economic interest to go solar. So every house and business and warehouse and factory and so on is going to have solar, because it's going to be in their best selfish economic interest. Now, what's going to happen in cities that can't generate 100% of, I'm not saying that folks are going to get off the grid. Most of us cannot generate all we need, but essentially it's going to be a distributed, like the internet, it's going to be an internet of energy, an internet of solar, an internet of batteries. What happens with data centers and aluminum smelters and so on? Well, we still need utility scale. And what is happening in large scale generation is that essentially we're falling under 4 cents per kilowatt hour in solar. And just to give you an idea, solar at about 5.8 cents is equivalent to gas at 5, and it's equivalent to oil at 10. Good luck competing with solar, right? And that's at 4.8 cents. Now, we're way below that already. In fact, in Dubai, they announced that 3 cent solar, 2.99 cents. That's half of 5.8, right? And in Abu Dhabi, they announced a 2.4 cent per kilowatt hour. 2.4, right? I mean, I spoke with the CEO of a utility who had just signed a 3 cent deal, and he asked me, do you think I paid too much? So now, no, hear me out. In 2009, I published a book called Solar Trillions, where I said that solar was going to be below 3.5 cents by 2020. And what did people tell me? Yeah, what are you smoking, right? And that was in 2009. We blew past that, okay? And that sounded insane in 2009 when solar was at 30 cents. But all you needed to do was do the cost curve of both solar and capital costs, right? So at 3 cents, there is nothing that can compete with utility scale solar at this cost. Not gas, not coal, nothing can compete with solar at with 3 cents, period, end of story. So essentially any new investments have to go solar, because any other investments are going to be stranded. Any nuclear, any coal, any natural gas is going to be stranded in a place where you have sunshine, the way you have here, at least in the desert. And not only that, solar, some folks are saying, oh, but what about storage? I mean, you can only generate during the day. What about in the evening? Well, guess what? Tucson Electric just announced solar plus storage at 4.5 cents. 4.5 cents. Gone. Everything else, gone. So solar, distributed solar, because of the economics, is going to eat everything, because it's going to make economic sense. And that's going to happen in most places by about 2020. It's already happened in places like Australia. Australia, solar residential is 25%. 25% of homes in Australia have solar. I mean, the equivalent here would be 20 million houses, right? Now, in Australia, transmission is 12 cents. Solar is 7 cents. So the concept of God parity, which again sounded crazy 3 years ago, is already here. I mean, it's already happening in some markets around the world. And of course, peakers already obsolete. Peakers generate at 20 cents, 40 cents, 70 cents. And when solar plus storage is 4.5 cents, this is pure economics, right? It doesn't make sense to build peakers anymore. So let me wrap it up and let me go back to the future. It's 2017 and we're here. A lot of the technologies that I'm telling you about are still in the 1 to 2% or so market globally. In some countries like Germany, it's 50% or 30%. In Australia, residential, it's 25%. But globally, it's about 1%, 1.5%, which leads mainstream analysts say not going to happen anytime soon. But the economics are already here. I mean, the unsubsidized solar, the economics are already here. And this is not an energy transition. This is a technology disruption. And it's going to happen very, very, very quickly. And the tipping point is going to be about 2020 or so for both energy and transportation. Thank you.
So that's that. That's that. A really interesting perspective, a hopeful look. How many people did I put you to sleep? 6 years still here, good for you. But that's true, Ward. Like, there still will be like uses for fuel, certainly, but it's about like even if fossil fuels diminished in use by like 20%, right? Like that's a huge win. That's a huge win across the board. And I put a couple of notes here. A bunch of cheap cars, eh? So we're going to have a bunch of cheap old fossil fuel cars that we could park somewhere. How about we park it in the middle of the 401? How about that? Just as an idea, right? Just as an idea. And I completely agree with you, Barnabas. They say insurance will go away, but you watch. Yeah, they'll do something like that to keep their hooks in it, right? I think you're completely right. And that general thing, like this guy's speech, you'll notice it's very hopeful. He keeps saying the phrase like the economics will make economic sense, but the capitalists want to do everything they can to keep energy metered, right? They want to do everything they can to keep energy metered. And they'll find a way, right? They'll find a way to wedge themselves between the populace and open energy, right? Which is what we're talking about. Like, it becomes very easy to perceive, like, you put a solar panel on top of an electric van or an electric, like, bus, right? You live in the bus and travel around the world on the energy that's being provided by the sun. In this vehicle that you're in, right? Like all of your power generation is, so you're decoupled from the grid, right? And it becomes easy to see how there will be people who will do this. And that's exactly what these capitalists are going to work to try to prevent. They are going to try to attach themselves and keep metering and keep prices high for the populace, because that's what the capitalists do. The big thing I want to talk about this, okay? So what this guy is suggesting, and I think his argument's pretty good, but what this guy is suggesting is a diminishment of oil, right? And he doesn't get into it because he's an economist, right? But Google Maps, any excuse to open Google Maps. That's my Google Maps song, just for you guys, right? So all of the wars over the last, 40 years have been about oil, right? It's been about getting oil. And oil is a special commodity because it is linked to the American dollar. That the American dollar is called the petrodollar. It's the currency of last, it's the reserve currency. It's the currency of last resort. There it is, I got there. And if we're saying that oil usage will decline and that the price will drop, right? You're looking at a massive collapse of the United States currency supremacy. That China and Russia are releasing their own currency already, right? And if the American dollar basically falls on its face on the world stage, these European nations may very well start trading in this currency. If that begins to happen, the United States loses its prestige on the world stage completely. And it's 100% because of what this guy is saying, that there's going to be this disruption in the market caused by solar, a disruption of the fossil fuel industry, and the United States' entire economy is completely based to the point where they're willing to go to war. They're willing to destroy Libya, destroy Saudi Arabia, destroy Yemen and Oman. Or sorry, not destroy Saudi Arabia, destroy Iraq. They're willing to destroy Afghanistan, right? They're willing to do anything it takes. They're like fracking and deep drilling the ocean, for God's sakes, right? Like they're going after trading grain, yeah, trading grain, sure. And it's it becomes very, very difficult for me to perceive a world moving forward where the United States is holds its place of supremacy outside of violent force. And this is where we start to get into really weird territory, right? Because like the whole thing over Venezuela, all the sanctions and everything, is 100% based on oil, right? And in very short order, the United States is going to be looking at Venezuela being like, well, that oil's not really that valuable to us any longer, right? Certainly not as valuable as it has been. It's also like a bright, sun-shining, like, piece of hope, because it does mean that, like, from the fossil fuel perspective, right, we'll be producing less carbon, that it will actually help in this climate change struggle that we're all facing up against. And the reality is that when we're talking, and he doesn't really talk about it, but when you look at the numbers, like I did the research, or I started doing some cursory research after I saw this, China's the one that's making all the solar panels. They've been doing it for years. All of the gains that we've made in solar technology has not come out of Western capitalist markets. It hasn't. It's been happening in China because China is the one that took a look at solar and said, that's the future. And so they're the ones that have been building it. They're the ones that have been investing in it. They're the ones that have been doing the R&D. And what's going to happen? The Americans are finally going to start getting their heads out of their asses, and they're going to start putting solar panels up. And then hopefully the climate change issue will start resolving itself, and the Americans will do exactly what the Americans do, which is claim victory because they bought in at the 0 hour, right? It's exactly the same thing they did during World War II. Literally, the Nazis invade Russia, the Russians defeat the Germans, right? Push them back, win the war, right? And then the Americans, after the Germans are weakened, roll in, plant a flag, declare victory. Same story with the space race, right? The Russians are the first people to get into space. They're the first people to get a living organism into and back down to space. They're the first to orbit something around the planet. They're the first to put a human into space and have a human come back. But the Americans land on the moon, so they win, right? USA, 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 right? So they're going to do the same thing here. They're going to do exactly the same thing, where it's been China that's been doing the research, it's been China that's been developing, it's been China that's been pushing solar panels, and it's been China that's been putting solar panels up and building more solar panels and electric vehicles, incidentally. And then the Americans are just going to be like, oh shit, this is what's happening? Oh, and then they're going to buy a bunch, catch up, and be like, we did it. USA, USA, USA. Because, as you'll recall, the only thing that capitalists are good at is propaganda. It's the only thing they're good at. They convinced everybody that they won World War II. They convinced everybody that they won the space race, right? They convinced everybody that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, right? All they're good at is propaganda. And when you actually crack it open and look at what's happening, you realize, oh, these guys are fucking worthless. And they're going to fall right on their face, dude. Like, I expect to see, probably under Joe Biden, I expect to see an invasion of Venezuela, or an active military disruption of some sort in the South China Sea, as well as the Belt and Road Initiative. They're going to start doing all kinds of things that they can against the Belt and Road Initiative. Okay, guys, I'm going to pause for a second. Just go use the washroom. Chair stream, chair stream. Where's J.R. Ewing when we need him? Who's J.R. Ewing? Let's take a look. Who the heck is J.R. Ewing? Oh, this has got to be a super in joke, dude. I don't know anything about Dallas. The only thing I know about Dallas is who shot JR. That's it. And I think I only know about that because of the Simpsons spoof. Hey Lonnie, how you doing? Thanks for popping in. And so the one thing that this guy doesn't, not one thing, but another thing where this guy doesn't talk about is the disruption in the labor market, right? He's been talking about like disruption kind of on a corporate level or a national level, but he didn't talk at all about the disruption in the labor market, right? And this is why I think it's going to become so crucial for us to do something like a basic income or some other measure in order to guarantee people food and shelter. Because you heard what he said, right? If the EV market picks up, we're going to need less vehicles. Well, okay, so what are you going to do with that labor? You're going to lay off a whole bunch of labor because they're going to need to make less stuff. Oh yeah, don't worry about it, Lonnie. You can lurk your heart out. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like the video. All that kind of stuff. Do what you do, Lonnie. I believe in you. Yeah, and I like the quotations. It doesn't it feel like these days most everything is just sort of quote unquote work, right? Like it just feels like most people are like every time I look at the labor market, like all the jobs just seem like jobs. Like they don't seem meaningful or real or like what are we doing that for, right? And there are these odd like disruptive while I'm listening to this guy talk about how solar could be disruptive, like here's an innovation that I think everybody should have. Like imagine if you had a solar panel that you literally could just hang out your window, right? I could put a solar panel right here outside this window, just hang it outside the window, right? And then it connects to a battery that just sits right here, right? And that collects energy that I could use on my computer or anything. And then if you had enough of that and it was connecting to the central grid, you could sell it to the grid, right? Like, do I want to play devil's advocate for a sec? Asks Barnabas. In what regard? Like, why do I think solar would fail? Like, why would I think this thing would... Like, the only thing that's going to make something like solar fail is the politics of it. So you take a look at Australia. There's a great organization brought to you by the Australian government, right? A great YouTube channel, rather. It's like brought to you by the Australian government. And it points out that the Australian government is actually putting a tax on buying electric vehicles, making it more difficult to buy electric vehicles, right? And of course they're doing that because they're a conservative government and they're coming in to protect the oil industry. And that kind of activity is definitely going to happen, right? You're going to have short-sighted, backwards-thinking conservatives. I'm lost, Barnabas. I don't know what you're saying. But so the Australians, conservatives, right? They're going to stand against this. They're going to try anyway. But like, and what's going to happen is that these idiotic conservatives, right? Like Doug Ford is talking about building another nuclear plant in the face of all of this, right? Well, what's going to happen? Countries like China, countries like India, who don't have the same kind of manic connection to the fossil fuel industry, right? Like, the US dollar is connected to the oil industry, right? Like, think about what that does geopolitically. Like, think about what that does to a country's business and a national, on a national scale, right? If your whole dollar, the value of your currency, is connected to this single commodity, you're going to do everything you can to maintain that. Meanwhile, countries like China, which don't, the European nations, which are not connected to the petrodollar in the same way, South America, right? Russia, right? Like, these places don't have the petrodollar. Hey, Ruth, how you doing? I was wondering where the heck you were, Ruth. Yes, exactly. And I think you are onto something, Ward. You mentioned something earlier that was exactly right, that hydrocarbons have legacy. Like, people love their gas cooktops, or like, I have this gas truck, right? I have this nostalgia towards my truck. And you're absolutely right. There's going to be like a group of people who are just like, well, I've been using gas vehicles my whole life, and I'll die in a gas vehicle. Bury me in my gas vehicle. For sure. Like, for sure. But I do think those people will be in the minority. And steadily, that kind of thing is just going to phase right out, right? Well, and when I say phase right out, those people will die. Like, those people will die, and we'll look at them the same way that we looked at people who are still using, like, I don't know. There has to be people who are still using, like, 8-tracks while the rest of us were using CDs, right? Like, that has to be true. But, like, if a person was still doing that, you'd look at them like they were a weirdo. And I feel like a similar thing is going to happen here. And this guy is right about one thing. Like, these technologies are going to be disruptive. Like, I've always believed that what he is sort of pitching here was always in the future. I just always thought that it was going to come, like, at the end of my life, right? That at the end of my life, like, I would start seeing it happen. But this guy is laying out and showing some very clear evidence of it happening now, maybe even before I'm 40. So in the middle of my life, right? Like, that's a startling increase in scale, right? Increase in time scale. And it also adds this, like, really glimmer of hope in regards to the fossil fuel conversation, because it does mean, if this disruption happens, it does mean that there's going to be a decline in carbon emission, right? It has to go that way. All be dead by 2030, 2040 if they're lucky. Yeah, I mean, like, it's just going to be difficult. Well, and you know what I'm looking forward to, Barnabas? Like, it'd be nice to have an electric car. They're quieter, right? And as somebody, I don't own a car, and I doubt I will ever buy another vehicle again. But when I go out my door here, right? I live on a fairly busy street, like it's a thoroughfare here. Yeah, I could really go for all of those vehicles being quieter and there being just less of them. I'd be for sure down for that. Like, anytime I walk into any neighborhood these days, I like look around and I see how nice, and every neighborhood has its own character, even ones that are kind of run down. I'm kind of like, okay, this has its own character, it has its own quality, and there's something nice about it. And most neighborhoods I look around, I'm just like, man, yeah, like, this is what a cool shop here, or maybe house, or any of this kind of stuff, and the architecture is all unique and its own thing and all of that. The trouble is that it's all fucking surrounded by cars, right? It's like you're looking at like a beautiful ship, but the ship is just covered in barnacles, you know? And all of our cars look stupid. Like, all of these cars look really, really fucking dumb. They look like toys that are sold to like 19-year-olds, right? They're like, look how sleek, and oh, the contours, and oh, it's so rounded, and all this kind of. I'm just like, this looks stupid. Like, and they all look like this. They all have this really dumb. And in 10 years time, we're gonna look back on these cars and we're gonna be like, look how fucking stupid these looked. Like they like the way we look at cars from the 80s, the really boxy ones. You know what I'm talking about? We look at those cars and we're like, these look friggin' stupid. We're gonna look at those the same way and just be like, holy shit, what a waste of time all of that was. Your parents got you a 2008 Honda. Good for you, bud. You have nice parents. That's nice. Like, you know, it'll get phased out soon, but maybe the car you buy after that will be an electric car. Oh, it's nice parents. You should say thank you to them for tell them that the Canadian commie says that they did a nice thing for you. Aerocar is a Canadian startup. Stronach? Is this a person? Am I supposed to know who this is? Stronach-backed. Sounds cool. Stronach-backed. The term jaywalking was used by the auto industry to overtake cities. Yeah, there definitely was a moment of that, Lonnie, for sure, where like there was a well, the whole takeover of cities by cars generally, right? Like, there's just like be nicer to your parents, dude. You gotta be like 20, eh? How old are you, Barnabas? Don't answer if that makes you uncomfortable, but like, if my parents gave me a car right now, if it was a piece of total shit, if it was a car that had like a wobbly wheel and was like barely functioning, I would be I'd be like, thank you so much for this. That'd be so nice. Yeah, pre-70s cars had art, right? You go to Cuba and see their cars, right? And those are all like 1950s, 60s cars. And they have a real... of course you do. Everybody has personal grievances with their parents, dude. Preset, like... but they all look cool, right? The nice... It looks like there was an artistic vision there that had like personality. And each car had its own kind of like character, right? Whereas now every car looks the same because... It really is only being designed by one group of people, and those people are just doing like a cost-benefit analysis and like what's that called when you get a bunch of people in a room and you ask them their opinions? Focus grouped, and they're all focus grouping, right? And so every car, like, you're not making a car for a type of person or for an individual group or a niche or anything. A car is just being made to be the most appealing to the largest group of people. And when you do that, artistry dies. There is no art. No, I don't have 2K to give you, bud. Sorry. And if you haven't noticed or you haven't heard, there's this whole like EV disruption that's coming. So maybe I'll hold off for that. But going back to what you said, Lonnie, because it's totally true, like, the auto industry really pushed to take over cities. Like, the fact that, like, city infrastructure has been built in order to facilitate cars, right? And it's turned our cities into, like, absolute, like, it's terrible. It's terrible to be a pedestrian. It's terrible to be a cyclist. It's terrible to actually live in your cities because there's these, like, thoroughfares that have been carved through your city to permit people to drive through them. Right? Like the Gardner here in Toronto, it's a complete friggin' disaster. It's a money sink. And all it really lets people do is drive through the city and kill the harborfront completely. Right? Places like France, who are getting on board with this idea, oh, there's going to be less cars, there's going to be less car ownership, they're already planning to rip up their freeway and turn it all into parkland. And there's something you can get behind, eh? Wouldn't you love it? Like, if you're not living here in Toronto, I'll make it as clear as I can. Like, the Gardner is just a piece of total crap. Like, it sucks totally. Here it is, right? Like, It's this yellow line right here, built right on the harbor front. Okay, so if you're like walking from King Street down to the harbor front, which should be like beautiful beaches, right? Maybe cool, funky shops and infrastructure, right? Because it's lovely water, right? And you could have like beautiful beaches and everything all around here. Get a nice bridge here, get into the Toronto Islands, like all of this kind of stuff, right? You come down but instead of that, there's this huge, massive, loud, smelly, stinky, bullshitty eyesore, which is the Gardner Express itself, that you have to walk underneath, right? It's terrible to go through. And because it sucks and it's awful, it means that the harbor front itself just dies. It just completely kills it. Now, compare that instead to a place like Vancouver, which did no such thing, right? Which did no such thing. You can see its thoroughfares are well off the harbor front. And its harbor front, they've got an airport there, right? The university endowment lands, right? It's all green space. It's all beautiful. Well, what do you think's happened? They got shops. They got a lively harbor front. They got a beautiful kind of place. Stevenson's Fisherman's Wharf, right? Like, their water is actually beautiful, accessible, littered with parkland. Like, it's really, really nice. Instead, here in Toronto, what do? Oh yeah, let's pop a major eyesore directly on the harbor front and kill it completely. Just murder it. Totally murder it. Tear this all up, convert it into parkland, tell these drivers to take an Uber, get the hell out of here. Open source car decentralized manufacture. Yeah, could happen. If you search how the auto industry carjacked the American dream, you got it, bud. You got it. So what how the auto industry carjacked the American dream. 20 minutes.
It was nighttime
20 minutes might be a
and I
bit
heard the
long.
sound of machine
I don't know if I'll
guns
play
and
20
screaming.
minutes.
In 1968, the Beatles released a song. Okay, let's not shoot this in the literal middle of the road. Jesus Christ. In 1968, the Beatles released a song called Why Don't We Do It in the Road, which asked, why don't we do it in the road 15 times? And it's a bad song, but it's an even worse question, because everyone knows you don't do it in the road because that's where cars live, and one might come along while you're in the middle of doing it and kill all three of you. Remember, this is the Beatles in the 60s. They're putting up Chamberlain numbers. 3 is being conservative. But before the 1920s, getting your rocks off in the middle of the street was just a regular type bad decision and not an explicit death wish. And that's because the road wasn't for cars, it was for people. Then the fledgling auto industry realized what an insane amount of money it could make if it could just take over the roads and remove any other way of getting around that didn't involve a car. All they'd have to do is use front corporations to buy up streetcar companies only to rip up the track and shut them down, use racist advertisements and pay off politicians to shoot down laws that regulate cars, and launch PR campaigns to make it illegal for people to be in the street, like this one.
And believe it or not, they leap in front of moving cars. Most of them suffer from an anxiety overdrive, a mania for achievement.
And more, obviously. This is just the end.
This just goes to show you how effective propaganda is, right? And why it's dangerous to allow large-scale corporations to spew bullshit into our airwaves and into our society. Because propaganda is extremely effective, right? The hit, like, this is just yet another example, right? Like, we all laugh at Reefer Madness, right? Like, Reefer Madness is like the shining example of, like, look how friggin' stupid this propaganda is, and it completely worked. It completely worked. We showed people Reefer Madness, the stupidest, dumbest, most illiterate, most ridiculous, most obviously lying bullshit piece of propaganda that we could show a person, and everyone bought it. That's how easy it is to con people. That's how easy it is to con people. If it's well constructed, if it looks like it has information, and if it looks authoritative, people will just be like, "Oh no, marijuana! "Oh, marijuana is so bad," right? The same story with like the anti-communist propaganda in the McCarthy era, and the same story right here, where literally you're telling me they just did a camp, like everybody's walking around in the streets, everybody's walking around in the streets having a fine time, having a nice life, all this kind of stuff. Suddenly there are these cars, and they just start propagandizing their people, saying, "Get out of the street, you gotta make way for cars," and everybody was just like, "I guess I gotta make way for cars," right? That's why it's dangerous. It's dangerous to propagandize your citizens. It's dangerous to allow large-scale private institutions to propagandize your citizens. It's dangerous to allow the CIA to propagandize your citizens. It's completely dangerous to let large-scale organizations of any sort freely propagandize your citizens as if it isn't propaganda, right? Like if at the beginning of every single one of their propaganda pieces, like Amazon through the Washington Post had to say, "This is paid for by Amazon, by the Washington Post. It is propaganda," then they could say what they want. Because what makes propaganda so efficacious is that people look at it and think that what they are seeing is actually authoritative, right? That it is actually backed by like strong sources. But if you front load something by saying, "By the way, this is bullshit," then people will be a touch more skeptical about it. Oh, it's brutal. Like, okay. Yeah. I'm not going to watch all of this, but just that, like, that by itself is enough to make me be like, oh, fuck. We're so easy. We're so gullible, right? Like, that's the big thing I've learned over the last, like, 4 or 5 years. Like, I used to shake my finger at corporations and be like, "Oh, you evil corporations." But I don't know, dude. Like if I was trying to sell stuff and people were this fucking gullible, there's this great Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode where Quark, who's a Ferengi, and the Ferengi are all about like profit. They are capitalists, and the Ferengi. Quark finds out that we were dropping nuclear bombs, and he says, "Wait, the people in the 21st century were dropping nuclear bombs in an enclosed environment? Oh, I could have sold them anything." And it's just like this little moment of like, yeah, we are fucking stupid and gullible. We believe anything we're told, and we just do stuff and there's no fucking consequences. Like, we're just a very, very stupid species. Like, we just don't pause and consider for a moment. Maybe these guys are full of crap, right? Oh, maybe if the auto industry is telling me something, maybe they're doing it only to sell cars, right? Maybe the only reason the auto industry is even talking to me is to sell a car, right? And, like, if you're sitting there being like, "Oh, yeah, that commercial had a point," and you don't actually think they're bullshitting you so that they can sell you a car, then you're a gullible rube. And it is getting to that point. Like, it is kind of getting embarrassing that we as a culture are, like, that voices from the left are having to actually start coming out and say, clearly and cleanly, fuck, are we gullible? Boy, are we a bunch of gullible rubes. Like, and it seems like it's most of us. It seems like it's like the vast majority of us. And that, like, why else would people keep voting conservative, right? Like, it's just like the most gullible people. Anyway. It's good to know that jaywalking is legal in Vancouver. Fuck these cars. Get out of here. Yeah, never mind bike lanes. Let's make sure pedestrians have the right of way in Toronto. Like, I just like, yeah, you go down to like a place, and it's fun because there's some sections in Toronto where it's still the case that pedestrians do like own the place, like Kensington Market, right? Like Kensington Market, if you go to Kensington Market, where is Kensington Market? Why am I so bad? I'm so great with like world, but in my own city. If you go to Kensington Market, right, and you walk around on the streets, you are so totally allowed to. Like, and a car shows up, and the car, like, you can look at the car. There it is. You can look at the car, and the car will just kind of give you the right of way, and like it's sort of slow going, right? Yeah. A worker who votes conservative is just like, what are you even doing? It was so cute when Aaron O'Toole tried to, he came out, he got elected, right, to be the leader of the Conservatives, and his first statement was, we here at the Conservative Party believe that the Conservative Party is the party of the worker. And the general response from the populace has been, ha, fucking idiots. Like, no, you're not. No, you're not, you liar. Right? If I ever met a worker of any sort who's like, yeah, I think I'll vote conservative, I'm just like, God damn it. Like, no wonder we're in such the pickle, right? No wonder we're in the situation we're in. We're so gullible. We'll buy anything. Like, I just wish that there was far more green space here, right? Don't you wish that the whole, like, this whole section of Toronto was just green? Like, I look over here and I'm like, that's nice and green, right? You zoom it out, though, and you really realize, like, oh, that's green, right? This looks like an infestation. Like, we've just, like burned sections of civilization down. And then we go over to, like, you go over to a place like, where the heck are you, Paris? Why am I so bad at finding cities? So good at finding, there we go. So yeah, the idea is that they're actually going to get rid. Is it this one or it's another one? They're going to get rid of that and turn it all into green space. Because, like, oh, it should, like, I don't, like, more green space, please. Like, this infrastructure is not that important to me. Like, it shouldn't be important to anybody. Like, Anyway. We're getting into ridiculous territory with that. Let's go back to Reddit. We got 40 minutes left on this. The residential school thing, always worth talking about, right? Always worth talking about. And this picture, in my view, this is the picture. Like, this person from the Halifax Herald, they nailed it. Like, the facade of a school and, like, a literal concentration camp right behind it. That's the residential school system, without a doubt. The finding of 215 children in a mass grave near one of these residential schools. Anybody that wants to tell me that there's no systemic racism in Canada, like Aaron O'Toole tried to downplay, like literally a couple of months ago, he's just like, now, the residential schools did start as a school. Their main goal was to educate people, after all. Like, shut up, dude. Like, shut up. That's embarrassing. It's so embarrassing that the leader of any political party here in Canada would stand up and say out loud to anyone at any time, yeah, the residential school system was, it was a school. First and foremost, it was supposed to be there as a school, right? Shut up, fucking idiot. Where is the Pope? Pope, Canada residential schools. What'd he say? Has he said anything? No apologies. No apologies for Canada's residential schools. That's back in 2018. Boo. Boo. The Pope should apologize. Boo. Boo. Yeah, well, who's surprised though, right? Like even this quote unquote nice Pope, right? Pope Francis is supposed to be the nice Pope, isn't he? Right? You can only ask so much from these guys, right? It took him forever to acknowledge that, oh yeah, the Earth does rotate around the sun. So, we should expect a similar timeline. You'd make the Pope work at Walmart? Oh, wow. I don't know if I would wish that on my worst enemy, Barnabas. Have you noticed that Pierre Pellevieux guy is talking more blue-collarish? Let's be really sure we're both talking about the same guy, right? Pierre Paul. We're talking about this guy? Yeah, this guy. This guy right here is definitely angling for leadership in the Conservative Party. For sure he is. And part of his strength is that he actually cites the facts and he talks from evidence. His worldview is inverted, in my view, but he's not a denialist, which makes him a strong conservative. I would keep an eye out for this guy. Because he's positioning himself, he's angling, he's saying the right things. When he talks, he doesn't sound insane. And in fact, usually when I've heard him speak, so if he speaks for 5 minutes, the first 4 minutes are not only rational, but super rational, where he's like laying everything out, and it's absolutely the truth. And then he finds in the last minute, he finds the way to invert it, so that instead of it working on behalf of workers and citizens, it's working against them. But because he's front-loaded himself with such clarity and rational speaking, you kind of get on his side. And so when he does the inversion, he kind of takes you along with him. Right? And you can kind of end the conversation being like, that Pierre Paul, are you really? Yeah, everything he said made a whole lot of sense. I'll vote for him so that he can privatize my infrastructure, so that he can privatize my healthcare system, so that he can lower taxes for corporations, so that he can do everything he can to prop up the capitalist power structure and ensure that you have to pay more rent, and you have to pay more, because he is the manifestation of what I'm talking about, how we are a bunch of fucking gullible rubes, and a con man like Pierre Paul Youre is very, very good at it. Every time I listen to him speak, I walk away thinking that is a dangerous con man, because he will absolutely sell us out to corporate power, and he'll look good and sound good doing it. He's probably the most dangerous conservative in the Conservative caucus at the moment, because he looks good, he sounds good, he's actually got a bit of charm in him, right? And more importantly than that, he understands that the best grifters are the ones who use the truth and then just drop in that little tiny lie. And Pierre's lie is that trickle-down economics works. That's his lie. That's his base lie of assumption, that we should sacrifice everything to the altar of corporate power. And he understands, though, that to get workers to vote for that, he needs to accept everything they say and then present a solution that sounds appealing but is fundamentally a lie. So this guy's extremely dangerous. We'll see where it goes. Right now it's Aaron O'Toole's show. But every time this guy talks, I'm like 80 to 90% of the way in agreement, and then he just twists it right at the end. Like, and I don't take lightly the idea that like this guy's really dangerous, right? He's more dangerous than somebody like Derek Sloan was, right? Hi, Robin. How you doing? Thanks for popping in. Like, Derek Sloan is a fascist, right? He gets kicked from the Conservative Party because he's an easy target, right? And it's like one of these like sacrifice your own sort of situations in the Conservatives. Like, they are being presented, like the Liberals did a pretty good job of thrusting Derek Sloan onto the stage and thrusting it into their face, especially during the Trump era, right? And so the Conservatives oust Derek Sloan directly, and it's just sacrificing one of their own to let like the real danger show, right? Like, here's Pierre Paul Youre, right? He's very dangerous. Most of the Conservatives are dangerous, but he's dangerous because he's actually electable. Ontarians thrilled case numbers down to level that would have terrified them in September. Yeah. We're under 1,000 cases, so that'll expedite the reopening, I'm sure. Yeah, the richest 400 Americans now own nearly 20% of the entire United States GDP. Yeah, their wealth compounds as the bottom half falls off a cliff. Like, if you're against a wealth tax at this point, I think you have a mental illness. Straight up. Yeah, the Roman Catholic Church is a corporation. That's a good way of thinking about it, too. Right? Like, once you realize that they're a corporation that's just really committed to their cosplay, right? That they're just, like, all that they're doing is presenting, like, that's just their brand, right? The hat and the scepter and the robe and all of this and the book and all of that, it's just their brand. And the second you recognize that that's what it is, they make a whole lot more sense as an institution. Like, it's like, we can have a larger conversation about them through history and like how they came about and why it was important for the Catholic Church to come about. But like right now in the modern era, especially, like, what are they? Right? Like, why do they exist? What are they for? Right? When you have a bunch of nations that are democratic, we have like the UN, like we have all of this, like, what's the purpose of this institution? Why do they exist? And more importantly, why are they like one of the largest landowners? Right? The Catholic Church owns like a ton of land. They're in the top 5 for sure. So it's just like, why? Like, what are you doing exactly? I mean, besides operating the largest pedophile ring in the world, right? Wouldn't be too surprised to find out that Jeffrey Epstein was well connected in the Catholic Church. I'm the hardest Marxist since Che Guevara. I would be blown away by that, Barnabas. I would be blown away by that. I mean, Che Guevara like killed people. He like shot people, dude. Have you shot people? Come on. Don't bullshit me, Barnabas. Don't out yourself, though. I don't want to be responsible for your imprisonment. I'm late getting things ready for tomorrow. It's mostly churches and cemeteries. Yeah, that still counts. That's still land, right? Like, churches still matter. Cemeteries still matter. That's still, like, important stuff. I walk through a cemetery every single day. Yeah, it's going to be weird seeing the capitalists try to seize that land back, like the cemeteries. And they'll probably just propagandize us and be like, don't get buried in a cemetery. You should shoot yourself into space. That's probably how they'll do it. They'll be like, take your remains and shoot them into space. Join the stars. And so it'll like become passé to bury yourself in a cemetery. And then they'll begin like the exhuming process. Or not, right? And then we'll have a whole bunch of like haunted Walmarts. DSA International Committee hosting a discussion with Peru. Oh, this is a good opportunity for me to say Socialist Action is having a big event. Socialist Action is the organization, the political organization that I'm a part of. They're having a big event Saturday from noon to 9 p.m. Really highly recommend everybody tune in to their YouTube channel, Socialist Action. Really easy to find. And they're going to have a whole bunch of like education kind of things talking about the history of socialism and what we can do to get connected. And and I think it's important that everybody get involved with an organization like Socialist Action that is actively attempting to move political parties to the left while not being co-opted by those political parties. Right? People who like donate their $5 to the NDP or donate the $20 to the NDP or the Liberals even, and then like stand back and expect those organizations to actually do anything for them are fooling themselves. We need to get involved with third-party, non-affiliated political organizations that are explicitly anti-capitalist so that as a bloc we can go in and say to organizations like the NDP, you must vote for these policies and you must support these policies or we will take our vote elsewhere. And that's how you actually shift the discourse. This idea that people have where they're like, oh, I'll just donate $5 to the NDP. The NDP doesn't. They're going to be like, thanks for your $5. No slag off. And that's what's going to happen. Nah, they will modernize cemeteries and funeral industry with suicide booths first. Yeah. Just like these Amazon booths. I just did it. Today's video was about the Amazon booths. I'm so dead convinced, dude, that they are for sure setting up these Amazon booths okay, so what they've done is they've set up a booth inside of an Amazon warehouse where someone can go, and it's like isolated and like soundproofed, so they're disconnected from everything else. And then there's a computer screen where you can like open up programs, and I'm like, they are for sure hypnotizing you. Like, they are for sure hypnotizing you, right? That they're going to put a computer screen in front of your face, sit you in an isolated booth that you've agreed to be in, you've consented to sit down and look at it, and they're going to go, you love working for Amazon. You love working here at Amazon for Jeff Bezos, who is a god amongst men. You love Amazon. Please have a good day. Then you just go back to work, right? Like, for sure they're going to do that. I don't know how anybody could think that they were not attempting to do that with these Amazon booths. Like, it's all just like, no, it's just going to be a space for people to go if they need to meditate in front of a computer screen, right? And before anybody tries to challenge me on the fact that hypnosis is real, hypnosis is completely real. If you do not think hypnosis is real, you are fooling yourself. Hypnosis is completely real. And people who know how to use it and people who know how to manipulate people with it can for sure use it for evil, right? It's one of those things where it's very scary that organizations like the CIA are the ones that are researching through a project called MK Ultra, which, if you don't know about MK Ultra, do yourself a favor, right? It's super easy to find. MK Ultra, Project MK Ultra, read up on Project MK Ultra. Codename given to a program of experiments on human subjects that were designed and undertaken by Central Insurance, some of which were illegal. Oh, wow, the Central Insurance Intelligence Agency doing something illegal. No kidding. Experiments on humans were intended to develop procedures and identify drugs such as LSD, brainwashing, psychological torture, and hypnosis. Boom. Right? They've done huge studies and are still doing huge connections to hypnosis. Do I happen to know any U.S. analogs to that? Socialist Action is involved in the United States, Robin. So I believe that you can find branches of Socialist Action throughout the United States as well. Outside of that, I mean, Marxist.ca, another one that exists out in the world. Yeah. And it is over-exaggerated in fiction, and also it's not 100%. It doesn't have 100% efficacy. So like Barnabas, you just said you must be immune. Maybe you are, right? Maybe you are. Like it's completely possible to be immune to this thing. There's a YouTube channel that talked about this recently, Chill Goblin. You got it. You got it. Chill Goblin. Hold on, before I do that, I want to subscribe to Climate Town. Okay. Chill Goblin. CIA, evil or inept. How did Canada get Medicare? Okay, I like it. Top 10 zaniest CIA blunders. That's hilarious, dude. I'm subscribing. I'm in. There is no radical left in U.S. politics. Yeah, this guy's he's on the right. I like his branding. Chill Goblin. I like what he's talking about. Neoliberalism, how it ruined everything. Oh man, I get so jealous when I see people like this who have more subscribers than I do, and they're essentially doing my shtick, and I'm just like, I want that. I want to be doing what he is doing. And then I look at the videos and I'm like, and he's doing videos better than me. Look how much better these videos are than my videos. 3, 2, 1. Oh! Like, look at this. He's got animation in the back.
Please give
give the instructions. Just kidding. It's me, Chill Goblin. We like to have fun around here.
He's got
Who doesn't love
costumes.
movies like Men in Black?
Right, look at that.
Figured out what
Look at
the
this. He's
extra
got like stuff in the
memoirs.
background.
His own.
I'm
spending
so
half a year,
I'm so
wouldn't you?
jealous. I'm so jealous. But I need to remind myself. Okay? This guy looks like he's doing like one video a month, right? One video a month, so he's pouring all his resources into like a 40 long kind of thing. Whereas mine is more like it's a more informal walk and talk. That's what it is. I'm offering something different. My videos are shorter. They're more informal. They're more based on creating a kind of that Rick Mercer, Rick Rant sort of feeling where you connect in for a brief period of time, have a kind of a thing. And also he's probably been doing it for way longer than me, so he's like ahead of me. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Oh, okay. PSMLS? I don't know what that is. I tried to be hypnotized once and nothing happened. Yes, sometimes it straight up doesn't work, right? And there's this one kind of truism about hypnotism that I've seen from all of the hypnotists is that if you are not, if you are skeptical, like if you don't consent, like if you don't buy in at some point, so if you know that you're going to be hypnotized and you put up resistance, even if that resistance is subconscious, right? Even if that resistance is like, skeptical, then it's more difficult for you to be hypnotized. That the human body does have like a natural resistance. That to be hypnotized, you need to somehow consent, or you need to lower your guard. You need to be unaware that you're being hypnotized, right? Or if you are aware, you need to be like totally chill with it and go in and be like, okay, cool, here we go, let's go, right? Yeah, TV shows are hypnotic. I think you're right about that, and I don't know if that's come about. Like people just like having the TV on, right? Yeah, you got to buy in. Exactly, Robin. And but this is important. You either have to buy in, or you have to be unaware it's happening. There are examples of people using hypnosis on people who were unaware that it was occurring and it being successful. And so it's possible that to me is like the most scary and dangerous part about the whole thing, right? And a big reason why I think, like we were talking about propaganda and how effective it was in our society, but I think that also has a lot to do with the rise of television, right? That, as Ward is saying, television has a hypnotic quality to it just as it is, right? It is just hypnotic. And so whether or not we've done this purposefully or not, we created a medium that has a hypnotic element in it, spread it throughout an unsuspecting populace, and then bombarded them with propaganda. And so, of course, it's efficacious. Of course, it works on large scales, on large measure of the populace. And it's only now that these technologies are in the society and are well entrenched in the society that we're starting to get large groups of people who are dealing with, who are working with the technology while simultaneously being extremely skeptical, right? Like I would say that I'm an extreme skeptic, right? Like I am willing to take seriously most any conspiracy theory that I see, because there's too many of these conspiracy theories that have absolutely proven to be completely 100% true, right? Like Project MK Ultra, like this here by itself, I don't need anything else, should tell me that the CIA is an organization that needs to be shut down, and it needs to be shut down fast. It's not going to happen. But the very fact that there are large groups of people with high levels of skepticism that are existing in the society today, I think is enough to sort of break the hypnotic trance that we have all fallen prey to. And I think that we have fallen prey to that hypnotic trance because of the rise of sort of this naturally hypnotic or seductive technology, such as television, right? Such as the internet itself is a fairly seductive, hypnotic technology. There's something just about the screen. We just like love the screen, right? And it's true. I just don't like. There's no sense denying it. There is something naturally hypnotic about it. Like how many people have like just been on their phone, just scrolling, just doing this on their phone, right? It's like 3 a.m. and you're just sitting there and you're not even processing anything. You're not even taking any information in. You're literally just like, we've all been here, dude. Like, we've all been here. And it's because the phone has, the screen has a natural, and this whole action, right? It has a naturally hypnotic, it's just got a naturally hypnotic way about it. And so that's something to be aware of and to realize, like, there's a potential danger there. And I definitely believe that high-level organizations like Amazon and the CIA, which incidentally work together, right? The CIA and Amazon have contracts with one another, right? So they're working together, right? I absolutely believe that those high-scale organizations are looking at stuff like an Amazon booth and being like, can we use this to hypnotize even a small segment of the workforce, right? Even if it was 10%, hell, even if it was 5%, if they found that they could effectively hypnotize 5% of the workforce to be like, Amazon's great. I love working for Amazon. Oh yeah, when I start to feel a little down, you know, I go into one of these booths and I sit and I take a listen, and then I feel so much better afterwards, you know? I feel so much better afterwards, you know? And I go back to work and it's like I'm chipper and everything's great. And then I go home and have a nice day and I go to sleep and come back to Amazon and everything's great because I love Amazon. They're so great. If 5% of your workforce was like that, it'd be a massive win. Be a massive win for Amazon. So like for sure, and there's going to be a smoking gun on this one. Every so often I do a story that's a little out there, and this story is a little out there, and I absolutely admit that. But every so often I do a story like this, and then there's a smoking gun that comes out about 2 months later, right? That just like is literally like, hey, remember? Remember what I was talking about? So. Yeah, the heart attack gun. For sure I believe in this stuff. Like, for sure I believe in this stuff, right? It's for sure, like, a heart attack gun, a gun which shoots radiation at someone so they get cancer and die, right? Yeah, that'd be easy to make. I feel like that the radiation gun has been around since the 60s. Like, for sure you can do this stuff. I think about Jack Layton, right? Jack Layton died, right? Died of cancer. Well, how difficult would this have been to just like every single day he comes home, right? Goes to his house, walks out of his car, right? You're in the, you know, city block over and you're just pointing a radiation gun at this guy, right? Every day he walks out from his car to his house and you're just like, just do that for a little while, right? See what happens. For sure I believe that exists. Now, am I saying that this happened to Jack Layton? No, I am just saying that the timing of his death by cancer seems pretty fortuitous if you're, you know, in the power structure, right? And like, mass media is an arm of the propaganda machine. Many movie scripts have to be sent to the CIA in order to get green light. Of course. Yeah, of course. Ward, I'm not going to change a thing. You're right. You're right. If you like it, Ward, then I like it, and we're going to keep moving along with it. And I shouldn't look at what other people are doing and think I should be more like that, because why would I want to be more like someone who's already like that, right? I should be more like something that doesn't exist, right? And I don't see anybody else doing what I'm doing in the marketplace of ideas the way I'm doing it, and I think that's why it's successful. So I need to calm the fuck down. You're right, Ward. Ugh. I just wish I had 1 million subscribers already, right? I wish that I was just the most popular person on earth already. I wish that everybody was... I wish I was a household name. And people would be like, Well, let's hear what John had to say about this. We'll get there. We'll get there. Malcolm McLaren got it right. You're just coming out with all the names, dude. I don't know who the heck you're talking about. Oops. Malcolm. What did Malcolm McLaren say? Oh, was he talking about this kind of stuff? I mean, he's an artist, right? So I just feel like he's probably got a more perspective, a more... Yeah, I wanted to be a living work of art. Look at this. Here's a guy who's probably just like a couple of decades before his time. Here's a 3-minute video. Let's go.
We don't wanna be like everyone else.
Drink. Suck.
Outside, round the outside.
The worm. I straight up think that fashion is going to go nuts now. Like, we're all going to exit this pandemic, and a whole bunch of crazy shit is going to happen all at once, dude. And one of them is just going to be like a fashion blow-up. Everybody's going to lose their minds. I'm looking forward to it. I think the heart attack gun was proven to be real, but actually don't quote me on that. I don't need to quote you on that, man. Let's do some research, right? Heart attack gun. Here you go. The CIA secretly created an undetectable heart attack gun. Right? There you go. It's easy to find this stuff, right? It's easy to find this stuff now. The internet has like blown everything apart in regards to information collection, right? And you can tell that the CIA, one of their strategies moving forward is confusion, right? That as long as the populace isn't looking at us, right, isn't looking at what's actually happening, as long as we can distract them and have them looking over here, and we can do that because there's so much information. There's so much, right? Like the CIA strategy is to have you like walk into the Library of Alexandria and be like, the truth you seek is here, but you have to find it, right? And so as long as you don't know what's going on, and as long as you don't get connected to people who are actually gonna like open the door a little bit and be like, hey, like, check it out, Project MK Ultra, right? Like, yeah. And so that's their strategy, is just obfuscation and just create so much information. And then on top of that, when they come out with information that is actually important, bury it in like, don't release a 1-page document that actually has the information, right? Release a 500-page document that spreads that 1 page of information out so that it needs to be interpreted down to the 1 page of information, right? Like really, really like don't make things easy. That's the CIA's role these days, right? Is to obfuscate and make things hard. Big music executives met with 4 private prisons to help gangster rap popular to keep the 4-prison system that's full. That's why intellectual rap disappeared. I'm a Manitoba boy. I don't know that much about rap. I gotta be really honest with you. Like, I know that Tupac Shakur died. I know a little bit more than that, but like, not my forte. Not where I live. You want to talk about Garth Brooks? I got big long stories about Garth Brooks. Well, there you go, Elias. You're welcome. I've informed you. Good small channel to check out is Blob Metropolis. You got it, man. You got it. I'm down to look up all this stuff. And shout outs to them. Spread it around. Blob Metropolis. They only have 68 subscribers, dude. Wow. This is a small one. Let's go.
In most schools and undergraduate economics classes, only one type of economics is taught: neoclassical economics. Superficially, this seems to make sense. Neoclassical economics has dominated academic research and top journals in the field for decades. However, it rests on shaky and unrealistic theoretical foundations and is very
Guys, I'm the 69th subscriber. I have to, right? He's got 68 subscribers. I'm going to be the 69th subscriber. This is absolutely my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. 69. Nice. Had to.
limiting in what can be studied and how. It focuses on deriving economic behavior based on a rational individual with no historical or social context, and it focuses on markets almost exclusively, ignoring non-market institutions, including capitalist firms, treating them as if they were markets, or just saying that they can be explained by a lack of complete markets. Many alternative schools of economic thought exist. Marxist, post-Keynesian, feminist, complexity, and ecological economics, to name just a few. These have their own strong theoretical foundations, unique insights, and empirical work to back them up. However, due to their marginalization within the field, very few learning materials have been developed for them below a postgraduate level, although there are some, such as Rethinking Economics' Introduction to Pluralist Economics. Blob Metropolis is aimed at providing a simple explanation of many of the core concepts of these heterodox schools of economic thought, taking on the same role as a textbook, so that students can first get a grasp of the main themes of a school of thought before diving into academic journal articles. But it is also a tool for social justice activism.
Yeah, great. Honestly, like just watching this guy, seeing what he's attempting to do, just the very fact that he's even attempting it, I think is worth watching, right? And if he's got like an animated structure, right? How often is this guy posting? So he's posting like one small video every couple of months, or every month, right? Absolutely. Like this kind of thing needs to get into the diet, right? Like just, and his thesis is absolutely correct. Like classical economics has dominated the way we think, and like neoliberal economics has taken over, right? Get rid of that. We at least need to understand other methods, right? Other economic systems or other economic ways of thinking, right? Because if you don't, and all you do is classical economics, then like you're going to get into like an incestuous worldview, right? Like it's not going to actually work the way that our economic system clearly doesn't. So we'll see. And the very fact that I got to do the 69th subscriber, which thank you, Elias. Thank you for saying nice. I appreciate that. Do you ever watch Government Secrets with Lee Camp and Graham Elwood? Yeah, Lee Camp is great. Lee Camp is really good. I actually really wish that Lee Camp would just drop the comedy shtick, right? I honestly, I don't find him to be a particularly effective comedian, but it's really clear that he wants to be a comedian. But like, just his shtick of being like a rebellious like outsider gets it done, in my view. And especially now, I really started to feel this way with him with once he lost his audience. Like once there wasn't an audience in his studio, and he started to just do the reporting as it is, right? And there's nobody there to laugh at his jokes, which aren't that funny in the first place. Then he kind of just became a more straight edge reporter. And because of the quality of his voice and his look and who he is, right? I just find him to be a very effective, forceful speaker. So I really wish that he would just bail on the comedy shtick that he's not very good at and stick with the like thing he is good at, which is taking a hammer and just like fucking hammering the shit out of this stuff. That's what he's really good at. And but you know, we're all growing, we're all changing. I'm not trying to say that to be critical. He's very successful, and should be successful. Like he's well placed in the discourse, and like is actually a voice that is coming out against like the Uyghur genocide, for example, right? Like he's one of the early adopters. It's still considered kind of a fringe leftist view to say that this Uyghur genocide is not really happening. But he's one of these guys that's steadily moving in that direction, right? So, okay, well, now that I've dropped a Uyghur genocide bomb on everybody, it is getting to be that time. Really nice stream today, guys. Really nice stream. I really had a great time. How many streams? 10 people are in the room right now. Make sure you give a like, give a subscription, send it around, let everybody know I exist. Let's get that subscriber count up through the moon. What do you think? Let's make me the most famous communist in Canada. I might actually be the most famous communist in Canada already. Anyway. You guys are doing really great out there, man. Yeah, every time you guys tune in, I have a great time because it's so nice hearing that there are other people out there. I know you're trying, Jeff. God bless your heart. God bless your heart. It's nice to hear from you guys. It's nice it's nice that you're giving me other people to look at. It's nice that we all get to look up stuff together and learn together, and spread things around together. And I hope you guys keep on tuning in. You're wonderful. You're beautiful. You are divine beings standing on divine energy. Do not let anyone else tell you otherwise. All right. Good luck. We're going to need it.